All over the world, many parents feel alone, grappling with the choices they have to make for their children. But in this small town in Ireland, by coming together as a community, they seem to have found at least part of a solution. That's all from this edition of Assignment with me, Beth McLeod. To hear more from the series, go to bbcworldservice.com/assignment.
That was Assignment from the BBC. I'm Saroja Coelho, and this is CBC Radio 1. Have a great day.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. I'm Marcy Marcusa. We're live with our team in downtown Winnipeg on 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. Thanks for joining us. We've really got a calm after the storm situation this morning. The rows of clouds in downtown Winnipeg driving into the studio on Portage Ave looked like sort of rolls of rolled cotton ball or something like that, with just shelves of cloud and clear sky between them after a stormy night last night. And, of course, photos all over social media feeds of funnel clouds. So we're going to get more information and hear more about it throughout the morning. There's one already on our YouTube feed up. Most of these in southwest Manitoba. So we're still reaching out to Environment Canada to find out more. But it is 3 minutes to 6 a.m. and it is your Thursday morning, and welcome to the show. Morning show's on until 8:37 a.m. If you have any issues in traffic, 788-3093 through the morning. And the person picking up the phone will be Corey Funk. Hi, Corey. Corey's directing the program, as always, as well. Good morning to Abby Adeyemi, who will be covering weather on air, and Abby's our technician on the show. And good morning to Kevin Nipatebo, who's behind the controls of YouTube with us this morning. Heather Wells is here also, and she is here from our news center to update us as well. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, family gathered for a vigil last night to remember the father who died after being stabbed near his son's elementary school in downtown Winnipeg. Ricky Manchese died on Tuesday. The assault happened around noon on Kennedy near Cumberland. His wife, Shirley Perreault, says they were walking home to meet their 12-year-old son for lunch when they were approached by an aggressive man. So far, police have not made any arrests. The youngest daughter of Morgan Harris was flooded with emotion to see the work already done to prepare for a search for her mother's remains. It's been more than 2 years since Harris and Mercedes Myron were killed and put in a dumpster. We're going to hear from L. Harris coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
In Winnipeg, by the way, today we'll have sunshine early this morning, and then once again, a chance of showers into this afternoon. Our high today is 20 degrees. Well, in the first hour of the program, we're going to dig into the changes to the capital gains tax and what specifically that means. We're also going to talk to Dr. Bardwaj in our medical column about preparing for heat and hot weather and the dangers and symptoms to weigh. And that's coming up as well. So stay tuned. And we're also this morning going to meet another one of our future 40 finalists. Right now, though, World Report.
On cue.
Hey, I'm Talia Schlanger sitting in for Tom Power. In her debut feature film, Ali Panku wanted to capture the nuance of comedy, how joy and despair can exist at the same time. Her new movie follows a stand-up comedian who's struggling with PTSD.
I showered today.
Oh my God.
I did.
Yeah.
Cue. This morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app. Or wherever you get your podcasts.
Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Canada is sending more weapons to Ukraine. National Defense Minister Bill Blair made the announcement this morning in Brussels. He is there at a meeting of the 56 countries providing military support to Ukraine.
Canada will provide Ukraine with 2,300 Canadian Rocket Vehicle 7s, or CRV rocket motors. I'm also announcing today that Canada will send an additional number of rounds of small arms ammunition, as well as 29 NANOC remote systems. The NANOC is a remotely controlled weapon station used by the Canadian Army on our own light armored vehicles, and the NANOC system can be mounted on various armored vehicles in Ukraine.
He also says Canada will begin shipping the first of 50 armored vehicles pledged to Ukraine this week. At the G7 summit in Italy, plans are being made to take frozen Russian assets and give that money to Ukraine for its defense. A government official says Canada could contribute $5 billion through this framework. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is a guest at this G7 summit. He is scheduled to meet with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau later today. Rafi Boudjikanian is in Italy with more on the talks.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau landing in Grottaglie, Italy. One of his first meetings during the G7 starting today is with Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany. And Trudeau will also sit down with French President Emmanuel Macron during a packed day that involves a working session on Africa and development for all the leaders.
It's put a little bit of pressure on Canada to really up its game.
Edward Akufo teaches political science at the University of Fraser Valley in British Columbia. He points out it's been 2 years since Ottawa has said it would come up with a strategy for the world's fastest growing continent, one that's now still being hashed out by parliamentary committees.
We seriously risk being irrelevant on the African continent.
But two conflicts that have captured global attention could well overshadow the Africa session. The leaders are expected to tackle the fighting between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East, as well as Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
There's a desperation for how to get Ukraine money.
Max Bergman is with the U.S.-based Center for Strategic and International Studies. He says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky badly needs the cash for weapons to repel Moscow.
Ukrainians are clearly on the back foot, trying to hold ground.
A Canadian government official says the G7 will be working on a proposal to use frozen Russian assets to provide Ukraine with that support. And Trudeau is also expected to meet Zelensky. Rafi Bujikani on CBC News, Bari, Italy.
The United Nations Refugee Agency says a record number of people were forcibly displaced in the past year. A new report this morning says conflicts in Sudan, the Middle East, and Myanmar are the root cause. It is calling for urgent action. Sylvia Saya works with the agency in the Democratic Republic of Congo. She says the impact of the conflicts is heavily felt by civilians. Families are separated, children cannot go to school, and food is more complicated to find. Sia says it forces people to lean on humanitarian aid. This is the 12th consecutive year the UN has reported a rise in the number of forcibly displaced people. It has nearly tripled since 2012. Coroners across Canada have historically not tracked the deaths of people experiencing homelessness, but as Carissa Donkin reports, a new national process could change that.
I just wanted them to realize that these faces, these names, they mattered. They were someone's mother, father, son, and daughters.
Sabrina Robichaud rides her bike to a mural in downtown Moncton, New Brunswick every day. She says she made it to remember people who've died on the streets, many of whom were her friends. She doesn't have a home herself, but Robichaud still finds a way to record the names and track down photos from when they were alive.
I wish half of them knew how much they were loved and cared and how much they meant to people. A lot of us, we don't think we matter to a lot of people.
New Brunswick doesn't track how many people die while homeless. Outside of British Columbia and Toronto, most Canadian jurisdictions don't. But the Public Health Agency of Canada and Statistics Canada want that to change. They designed a method to track residence types when someone dies and shared it with coroners and medical examiners across the country. Information collected as part of the project could begin flowing to the federal government as early as this summer. It's welcome news to Naomi Nichols, a Trent University professor who's been working to track this information in Peterborough, Ontario.
And right now it feels like we're racing against the clock. People aren't making it through, winter after winter. We're losing people.
She says the information could help inform government responses to drug and housing crises across Canada. Carissa Donkin, CBC News, Fredericton.
A truck drives slowly through a flooded street in Lauderhill, Florida. The southeastern part of the state has seen record rainfall and flooding. Sections of main highways are closed. A part of Fort Lauderdale's airport is flooded. Many flights expected to arrive today are canceled or delayed, and much of the region is still under a flood warning. More rain is coming today and expected tomorrow and through the weekend. Tesla shareholders have a multi-billion-dollar decision to make today. They are voting whether or not to reinstate a record-breaking pay package for the company's CEO. Elon Musk could make $56 billion U.S. Freelance reporter Tony Waterman has more from Austin, Texas, Tesla's headquarters.
We're handing over production Cybertrucks to their actual owners.
For the past 6 years, Elon Musk hasn't received a single paycheck from Tesla. Instead, he's been waiting on stock options worth more than 70 billion Canadian dollars after meeting difficult targets laid out by the Tesla board, including growing the company more than tenfold. The deal was approved by shareholders in 2018, but nullified by a judge in January, who said Tesla's board at the time was stacked in Musk's favor. On Thursday, shareholders will vote again. Carl Brewer is an automotive industry analyst.
As crazy as the pay seems, you can't really point to another individual who has accomplished what Elon accomplished.
But that was in the past. Amid fierce competition, Tesla's sales have been slumping. Its stock is down about 30% this year, and it's laid off more than 6,000 workers. Major shareholders, including one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds, say they're voting against it. In a video posted on a Tesla website, board chair Robin Denholm said the pay structure, which requires Musk to hold shares for at least 5 years, will keep him motivated.
Which means Elon is incentivized to drive the same growth that we've seen over the past 5 years for many years to come.
The question is whether he'd stay if shareholders vote no. Tony Waterman for CBC News, Austin, Texas.
Celine Dion may be Canada's best-known singer, but she can no longer do the things she loves the most. The international superstar has a disease that is slowly eroding her voice, and she spoke to CBC's chief correspondent, Adrian Arsenault, in Las Vegas.
There were nights when the wind was so cold.
Should you wonder why Celine Dion is now opening up after being quiet for so long about the illness that for nearly 2 decades has been eating away at her voice? Well, she says it comes down to being tired of the lies.
And lying for so many years. I have a tonsillitis, a sinus infection. But that was far from that. I couldn't live with the lie.
She lied when she canceled concerts, lied about why her voice was croaking or behaving oddly, because she didn't know for all that time that she had a rare and punishing illness.
There were days when the sun was so cruel.
Stiff person syndrome can cause muscular spasms so harsh it can break bones. And when we sat down recently to talk in Las Vegas, she said this has happened to her and it's agonizing.
When you get in spasms so much, well, you don't remember everything. It can last a moment, it can last a few hours. It's not just like a spasm in the calf in the middle of the night. It's pretty painful.
A global superstar, yes, but also a mom. She has 3 sons. Her twins are 13. And what we're learning now is that they are being taught how to help Celine. Panic buttons in her home, drills to get medical intervention when the spasms hit. What she's going through is a lot to take in for her, for them, for her fans. But this is where she starts opening up. She wants to, and she needs to. Adrian Arsenault, CBC News, Las Vegas.
It's all coming back, it's all coming back.
You can now stream that exclusive English-Canadian interview on CBC Gem and on the National's YouTube page. And watch it tonight on the National. Celine Dion, I Will Sing Again, is a 1-hour primetime special airing Friday at 8 p.m. on CBC Television. That's World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Wow. I don't know what stayed with you from that, but spasms that can break your bones. Wow. 6:10 a.m. is the time. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. This is Information Radio. Thanks for joining us on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. In the city this morning, we have partly clear sky, and this is the calm after the storm. All kinds of photos of different types of cloud formations. We're still confirming what they were. People talking about funnel clouds, tornadoes, touchdowns. We still are waiting for confirmation about what happened. You can see some pictures on YouTube right now if you're watching us online. But stay tuned as we get more information about that. In addition, this hour on the program, there's a change to the capital gains tax. It's moving closer to reality this week. We're going to lean more into the details of that and what it is. And now that the province has announced that the landfill will be searched for the remains of 2 women from Long Plain First Nation, this hour we're going to hear from its former chief about what she'd like to see as the search moves forward. So stay tuned for all of that. Right now, let's go to other news and with Heather Wells and stories and headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Yes, well, just off the phone just seconds ago, actually, with Dan Fulton at Environment and Climate Change Canada. And Dan confirms several tornadoes, there isn't a firm number yet, but several tornadoes did touch down across southwest Manitoba yesterday, 4, perhaps even 5. So we'll hear more about what he had to say. That system that brought those tornadoes has now moved off into Ontario, but today people will be checking out damage from those. Most of those tornadoes that were spotted were not in towns, they were in fields. So we'll hear more from Dan Fulton coming up. As well, taking away a person's rights is supposed to be a last resort in this province when a person's unable to care for themselves. But a CBC News investigation spoke to several people who say they were placed under the care of the public guardian and trustee of Manitoba when they shouldn't have been. We'll hear more from the I-Team's Caroline Bargout in our next news at 6:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
So my social media feed was just full of these incredible photos yesterday, as I'm mentioning. And it was interesting because in Winnipeg, at the same time as I was watching those photos come up all around, as Heather mentioned, southwest Manitoba for the most part, the temperature just dropped and you knew there was serious weather going on because we went from being really sticky in the afternoon to that cool weather moving in. So we'll have more information coming up. But right now, let's go to Abby for today's weather. Hi.
Yeah, hi, Marcy. I was also tracking that tornado yesterday, and I love chasing the sky, and I wish I could drive out, but they were more like far off away from me.
I'm glad. You gotta be careful. You're my friend. Don't do it.
Sometimes, but look at the tornado chases. They're like really some really cool people. Anyway, right now in Winnipeg, we are at the 13 degrees. It's partly clear and some clouds in the sky. We're going to start today sunny, but expect a mix of sun and clouds later. Now, by this afternoon, we should be getting a chance of showers, also risk of thunderstorm later in the day. Some parts of the city coming in this morning, I noticed some fog patches on my way in, but that should be dissipating as we get into the morning period. Then we expect a breezy day from the northwest, and we'll be seeing highs around 20 for Winnipeg. And for today, for tonight, the evening will be partly cloudy. We still have that chance of showers into the night period and a risk of thunderstorm, and the skies will clear up as the evening progresses, and the winds will definitely be light, and the temperatures are just going to drop down to around 11. But right now in Winnipeg, it is 13. It is clear. We're expecting some sunny day. It cleared up pretty quick after those storms last night, because I know it was really dark, but this morning I looked up and where did it go? It's like all just clearing up. So that's a good one. We'll see a mix of sun and clouds, and then a high of 20 today. Normal for this period of the year is 23.
Okay, so we're a little bit below normal with that 20 today.
Mm-hmm.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk, how are you?
Doing well. Have you ever seen a tornado touch down before?
No, you?
Once at my wedding.
Tell me.
Believe it or not.
Sure.
Yeah. It was my wedding. We were just kind of near the Salle on on a yard, farmer's field, where we got married, on my in-laws' yard. And I was coming back from the washroom towards our tent, and I look across the driveway, way in the distance. I look out and see a little funnel cloud. I just touched down, went back up. Yeah.
Wow.
And then it was me and a groomsman, and we were like, do we tell the guests? We didn't really go over procedure for that, and we didn't, and it was fine.
When is your anniversary?
Coming up, our 10th anniversary, end of July.
Okay, so this time of year. Wow, a little bit further out.
Yeah.
No, but you know what? I know we're going to be obviously focused on taking stories this morning and trying to figure out what happened last night, and we'd love for you to call us. You can call us actually live. You can call Corey anytime.
Totally.
We'll give the number in a second. But I would love to hear people's stories.
Totally.
I've never seen a tornado touch down, but you don't forget it.
No, you certainly don't.
Right?
Especially when at your wedding.
Unusual. 788-3205. That's the listener line. I know that's not what you're seeing on YouTube, but that's because we went on a tangent. Corey's here for traffic.
Yeah, you really haven't heard anything much going on out there right now. But if you do see something, or if you saw a tornado.
Anything last night?
Yeah, give me a call on the CBC commuter/tornado line, 204-788-3093.
Well, speaking of yesterday beyond storms, millions of Filipinos all around the world celebrated Philippine Independence Day yesterday. It marks the day the Philippines declared independence from Spain in 1898. And because, of course, Manitoba has the highest number of Filipinos per capita in Canada, Jim Agapito went out to ask what the day means to people, specifically to 3 generations of Filipinos he met with. He met with Jeff Reyes at his home music studio in Winnipeg. Jeff sang some of the Lupan Hinirang, which is the Philippine national anthem and means chosen land, in addition to their conversation.
I put my hand here, right? The first few lines. Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso.
What does that mean?
Well, you know, just the fact that your hand is on your heart right here is, you know, patriotism, history. You know, there's a lot of people, heroes that we call, that paved the way for our freedom. And yeah, it means a lot. It means a lot.
Today is Filipino Independence Day. What does that mean to you?
For me, growing up, first 26 years of my life back home, for me, it's close to resilience and I guess hospitality.
Can you be a Filipino in Canada? Do you get to celebrate being a Filipino here?
Absolutely. One thing we thank for in Canada is the culture. They embrace different cultures, and you're free and you're welcome. The active culture of Filipinos here is nonstop, and then we get these yearly annual celebrations too, which, man, there's like a lot of groups here that celebrate it.
What do Canadians need to remember as it being Filipino Independence Day?
That's freedom. Freedom, man.
Do you know the words of Bayang Magiliw? Can you sing some of it for us?
Sing?
Or just say some of the words?
Bayang magiliw, perlas ng silanganan, alab ng puso, sado di mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, duyan ka ng magiting, saman lulupig, di ka pasisil, sa dagat at pundok, sa simoy at sa langit mong bughaw, may dilag-ang tula at awit sa paglayang minamahal, ang kislap ng watawat mo'y tagumpay na nagniningning between at araw. That's it.
That's okay.
My name is Perla Havate, and I'm currently the president of the Philippine Heritage Council of Manitoba. Being here in Canada and enjoying fully what it is to be independent and being free, it becomes more meaningful for one, especially those who have experienced martial law, for instance. You know, we cannot really underestimate the impact it has on us. You know, the freedom that we are enjoying now, and we wish we would have that kind of freedom as well back home at all times.
Jubilee medal from the Queen.
So I have the gold, the diamond, and there's the last one, the purple one.
To your contributions to Canada.
To our fellow Canadians, I would say thank you for all the good things, for all the blessings that you've shared with us. We are here to contribute, to make our community better, to make our country really proud of the many, many cultures that they have. Canada is one of the top countries in the world. We're glad to be here, we're happy to be here, and we're here to stay.
Hello, my name is Jaden Kadag. So this is called the sulibao. It's an Igorot drum that's played during multiple dances, which is a traditional indigenous drum. So it's a long cylindrical tube. It's made out of wood. It's normally a dark color like black. And then the drum part, it's actually it's from an animal. It's I think it's a cow hide. Since I'm Igorot and also Filipino, since Independence Day celebrates the Philippines' independence from Spain, I think it's a very important day for us as Igorot people who are indigenous. The fact that our culture was able to survive after all of these years, after almost 300 years of Spanish colonization, it just shows that how resilient our people were, as well as other indigenous groups in the Philippines. And that's why it's really important to me and something that I celebrate with my family and other Filipinos.
Jim Agapito out yesterday on Filipino Independence Day, talking to 3 generations of people here in Winnipeg in Manitoba. So first of all, Canadian-born Filipino Jaden Kadag. Before that, Philippine Heritage Council President Perla Havate, and then also Jeff Reyes. There are several Philippine Independence Day events this month happening around Manitoba, by the way, as well. So if you want to still check those out and head out to participate, go to our CBC website to hear more about Filipino Heritage Month in Canada.
A classic board game created by a Canadian couple.
Yahtzee, that dice-rolling strategy game you play like cards.
An ice cream chain offering one flavor for every day of the month.
Get that 30 wonderful feeling.
And an iconic lighter that was named after a zipper. Brand Envy 2024 on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Thursday morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
6:22 a.m. is the time right now on 89.3 FM, 990 a.m. on the app or YouTube. Thanks for joining us this morning. It is, a mix of sun and cloud, but kind of a beautiful morning, calm after storm kind of thing. 13 degrees. Coming up, Heather Walls in the news is going to talk more about what happened yesterday over Manitoba. She was off the phone with Environment Canada confirming tornadoes touching down in our province. So we'll have more of those details at 6:30 for you. Right now, let's talk about the changes that are coming to the capital gains tax. Those changes are moving closer to reality this week, and there's a lot of political debate about it. Federal Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland's talking about an increase to include the inclusion rate on capital gains. So she says increasing tax revenue in that way is going to help fund programs for housing, pharmacare, and dental care. To talk about it this morning, David McDonald joins us now. He's a senior economist for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Good morning.
Good morning.
Now, I know we visited this outside of the federal, when the federal budget was announced, but I think a lot of people are still sort of like, what is this? Can you explain it really simply? What's a capital gains tax?
Yeah, so there isn't actually a tax on capital gains specifically. What's being discussed here is what's called the inclusion rate on capital gains. And that's just a fancy way of saying how much of this income counts as taxable income on your tax forms. Most income is 100% taxable, which is to say the inclusion rate is 100%. So if you're working a minimum wage job, that is 100% taxable. If you're making any salary, 100% taxable. Say you got laid off from your job and you're getting EI benefits to tide you over, those EI benefits are 100% taxable. And so when we look at capital gains, this is a different type of income. It is only 50% taxable, which is to say only half of it counts as income or taxable income on your tax form. It's kind of like a 50% off coupon on your taxes. And capital gains here is just the profit that you made on the sale of, say, real estate or a stock. So it's the sale price minus the purchase price. That's your profit, and that's your capital gain. And so what's being discussed here is a change in that inclusion rate. So instead of it being 50% of your profit being taxable, they're pushing it up to 66% of it being taxable on June 25th. For individuals, though, you have to make over $250,000 in profits in a single year selling assets for this to affect you. On the corporate side, where it also applies, there isn't that exemption, and so they'll pay immediately 66% on capital gains after June 25th.
So people who are asking sort of at the individual level, which you've just explained, I just want to reiterate this, who might, you're hearing about people saying, they have a rental property, or maybe they have a cottage that they own, or stocks, they made money on their sort of investment in stocks. If they have if their gain is $250,000 over on a sale, let's say you sell the cottage and you profit that. If it's $250,000, then you pay 50%, and they want it to be 66% now.
Yeah. So, for most Canadians, the impact of this is going to be pretty limited, actually. The biggest capital gains that most Canadians are going to make is going to be on their home, their principal residence. That's entirely exempt from taxation, so there's no impact there whatsoever. Even if Canadians have big stock holdings, those are generally going to be in an RSP or a TFSA, and those are completely tax exempt. So again, there's no real impact there. Now, if you're going to make $250,000 in profit on stocks and you maxed out your RSP and TFSA, first of all, you're doing pretty well for yourself. But even so, you could spread it over 2 years and, not get $250,000 in profits in a single year. As you noted, it's really folks with multiple properties that could be impacted here. You've got your home, which is totally exempt, but then maybe you've got a cottage or an investment condo or something. Again, if two people own the investment condo, a couple, which isn't that unusual, that can be split between the couple. So then you can make $500,000 in profits on your condo and still not see any change. But even so, it phases in relatively slowly. So say you made a profit of $300,000 on your condo, then the inclusion rate goes from 50% to 53% because it phases in slowly. Say you made $400,000 on your condo, the inclusion rate goes from 50% to 56%. Now, that's still a pretty good deal compared to if you'd made that money working, where the inclusion rate is still 100%. It's slightly higher, to be sure. But again, the impact's pretty limited for most Canadians
now,
when it comes to what they would generally hold.
Someone, though, who has made those choices and had made that money or has made those investments or has bought the cottage and resold it, made a great profit, might be listening and saying, it's not fair to make the comparison to taxable full income and saying, you're still doing pretty good or this should be taxed at full rate because they've made the choices to earn that money. And so is that at the heart of this debate, that people who obviously hold these will be affected by this, or saying, I earned that, I don't want to pay into the system? It's the greater good conversation, right?
Yeah, I mean, at the end, working income is just taxed more highly than if you're making money selling stocks and real estate. It's 100% taxable, whereas if you're selling real estate and stocks, only half of that gain counts as taxable income. It's a very different regime. If you're making money on real estate. And so part of the argument behind increasing this inclusion rate is making the money you make on the sale of real estate be taxed in a similar way to the money you make flipping burgers. It's still not the same. There's still a big discount, right? But it's trying to make that slightly fairer. Most Canadians don't make the majority of their income from real estate and stocks. They make it from going to their job every day and working for an hourly wage or working for a salary. And so this attempts to raise new revenue on this particular type of income.
I want to interject and move
for things like housing.
I'm just mindful of the news coming up here. I just want to ask you, David, I want to move away from the individual. I want to move to what you said about smaller, about corporations. So smaller incorporated enterprises like a doctor's practice or a small business, what might the concerns be there? How might they be affected?
Yeah, so I mean, docs, for instance, have said, that they're using their practices as a means of retirement savings, in essence, and they're sort of using that in their retirement. They already have RSPs and TFSAs, just like everybody else, but for some reason that's not enough. And what's interesting is that docs are doing pretty well for themselves. They can structure their affairs in such a way to reduce their taxes through corporate structuring and stuff, and potentially pay a fair amount less than 100% inclusion on the gains that they make, versus the nurse working at the front of that office whose income is 100% taxable. It's a very different situation for these docs who are doing pretty well for themselves versus, the folks who make a lot less, but their income's 100% taxable. And that's the kind of comparison I think that's worth making. On the other side, of course, is you're raising new revenue to pay for important programs to try to make housing more affordable. And so many of these capital gains are going to come from real estate holdings, a sale from real estate holdings. The value of those capital gains have gone up a lot because of the out-of-control housing market. So the folks that are making money on this housing market in terms of selling that real estate are, in essence, being asked to pay a small amount more to try to offset the impacts of those really high housing prices on everybody else who's not in that market but is trying to find just an affordable place to live.
Really appreciate you walking us through all the details. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
That's David McDonald, a senior economist for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. Right now, let's find out more about the storms that came across, especially southwest Manitoba last night. It's time for your CBC Winnipeg News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30 it is 13 degrees downtown. We start the day with sun, then we'll see a mix of sun and clouds, and again, a slight chance of showers with a risk of a thunderstorm. Today's high is 20. Well, it was a wild, wind-blowing night in western and southwest Manitoba. It's a video of a funnel cloud recorded in Swan Lake. Up to 4, possibly more, tornadoes touched down yesterday. Dan Fulton is a meteorologist at Environment and Climate Change Canada.
Multiple reports of tornadoes, as you were saying, like Rapid City, Rivers, Balder, all kind of in the countryside, like near those places. But quite a few reports as it made its way down to Morden-Winkler. No reports from Morden-Winkler, but we did get golf ball hail, sized hail, and some reports of wind damage in Morden-Winkler there.
Fulton says it is going to take some time to confirm the exact number of tornadoes that did touch down. And because most of the twisters were in fields and unpopulated areas, Fulton says it will be difficult to gauge exactly how strong they were. We'll have more on this story as it develops through the day. Manitoba's public guardian has left some people feeling trapped and helpless. Imagine waking up in the hospital, learning a government agency's taken over your life. It is a reality one Winnipeg man says he has been fighting for years. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout has his story.
2 years ago, George Kinsman fell in his apartment and was unconscious for 3 days. When he woke up in hospital, the staff told him they would get him some help if he signed some papers. So he did. What he didn't realize is he was giving up his rights and agreeing to be placed under public guardianship. That means a trustee makes all his personal and financial decisions and provides the 71-year-old with a weekly allowance.
I feel like they have me by the throat. They just keep holding on and holding on. I can't do anything.
More than 2,700 Manitobans are under the care of the public trustee. Kinsman believes the province should have a better mechanism to review those cases. That way, people mistakenly put under guardianship would have an easier way to get out. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Winnipeg father who was killed in a stabbing Tuesday is being remembered as a caring and funny man. His family held a vigil last night on Kennedy near Cumberland. People brought photos of Ricky Manchese and lit candles in the spot where he was stabbed. Manchese's wife, Shirley Perot, says they were married for 15 years.
He was such an outgoing person, friendly. He always lent a helping hand. He called himself, everybody called him like a comedian. And some people called him like a gentle giant.
Perot says she was there when the assault happened near their son's elementary school. The couple was walking home when they were approached by an aggressive man. She says her husband and the man got into a verbal altercation. When the man pulled a knife, he then fled the scene. Police say they are investigating and no arrests have been made. The youngest daughter of Morgan Harris is relieved the province is mounting a search effort for her mother's remains. It's been more than 2 years since Harris and Mercedes Myron were killed and put in a dumpster. Elle Harris visited the Prairie Green landfill this week to tour the site.
It's very overwhelming because we've been fighting for 2 years, and it's weird. It's going to be weird not to fight. It's going to be really weird being able to, have a day to myself and not have all these meetings I have to go to.
Harris was speechless seeing the healing lodge that's being built for families and the designated land cells that will be searched. She says she finally had a good night's sleep afterward. Yesterday was her mother, Morgan Harris's birthday. On Saturday, the Harris family's holding a powwow in her honor at Camp Morgan at the Brady Road landfill. A staggering rate of First Nations newborns have been involved in Manitoba's child welfare system. That is according to a new study by the University of Manitoba and 2 First Nations groups. It looked at data from 47,000 First Nations infants born in Manitoba between 1998 and 2013. It found 1 in 3 had an open file with CFS before they turned 1. Kathleen Kenny is lead author of the study.
I think the crisis of infant removal has been voiced for some time, and I think the underlying message here is that the need for change is urgent and that First Nations-led solutions need to be prioritized.
Manitoba Families Minister Nahani Fontaine says work is underway to, quote, decolonize Manitoba child welfare. More than a year after her shocking health announcement, Celine Dion is now telling her story to CBC's The National. Our chief correspondent, Adrian Arsenault, traveled to Las Vegas for a sit-down interview.
I'll sing again. That's for sure. We've had a lot of happiness because of the fans, paying shows and buying my records. And they have all the rights to have all the expectation. But if I may say, my own expectation is probably bigger than what they expect from me.
You can stream the full interview right now on CBC Gem or the National's YouTube page, or you can watch it online at cbc.ca/The National. You can hear the latest national and international news on World Report at 7.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells in our news department this morning. Now, just before we turn to our regional forecast here at 6:36 a.m., as you heard from Heather off the top of the news, Environment Canada has confirmed several tornadoes did touch down, mostly in southwest Manitoba last night, 4 and maybe 5. So we're still waiting for more confirmed details. We do have photos from Swan Lake and some more photos coming in this morning. We'll try to get all those up for you through the morning. But it's prompted us to ask, because Corey asked me, have you ever seen a tornado touchdown? I never have, but CBC's Megan Ketcherson has popped into the studio because you have.
I've seen technically 4.
Really?
Yeah.
So what was the most dramatic one, or the one that you really viscerally remember?
Well, so there was one when I was about 11 years old, and I grew up in Regina. So this was in Regina, and this was around the end of July. And my stepfather's parents were over from England, and of course we're standing out on the deck, and we lived near where the depot, the Mountie barracks are. And it's like, oh, look at those really weird clouds. And of course the English gent is very fascinated by this, and these 2 clouds came together, and then all of a sudden this tail came down and went zipping off across the park and then headed towards downtown Regina. And we were like, we should probably go inside.
Like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Did the temperature change? Was there rain?
So,
Did it,
no,
would
it was
sound,
it
or
was
was it far enough away that it was just visually stunning?
It was, you had that roar, but it was super, super hot that day and muggy, and then things got very still, and the sky went quite green. So that's, for me, that's my kind of warning, is that the sky goes really green, and it just got really still, and then all of a sudden this came together, and there was this roar.
Wow.
And the other one, I was quite little. It was like I was about 6, and there were 3 of them that had come down. There's a big storm in Regina, and they were twisting around each other out by the Regina airport.
Wow.
Yeah. So that stays with you.
And you would be in that moment where you're like, you'd want to watch, and in these days you'd want to take a photo, but then being mindful, like, hang on a minute here.
Yeah.
Get to safety.
Yeah.
So thank goodness we haven't heard of any issues last night with that, people's personal safety. We're still assessing, though, if there was damage and exactly where everything happened. Thanks for sharing your story, Megs.
Thank you.
Megan Ketcherson in from our newsroom this morning. It has prompted us to ask about if you've ever seen a tornado touchdown and what your story is. But first and foremost, what did you see yesterday in Manitoba? So what did you see where you live, and do you have something to share? And if you don't have a story to share verbally, maybe you want to share some photos. So we'll take those too. You can email them to radio893@cbc.ca, and you can always call us at 788-3093. I'm going to give the traffic line because it's a live line, and Corey will pick it up if you've got something to share with us, and then we'll talk. It is 21 minutes to 7. Let's find out about the weather today with Abby.
No tornado to report on my part, but I'll tell you it's 13 degrees in Winnipeg, and we're expecting sunny skies to start the day in Winnipeg as we move into the afternoon period. Now, the clouds will mix with the sun, bringing a chance of even showers and a risk of thunderstorm later in the day. The fog patches are already clearing out, as I mentioned earlier, leaving behind some breeze from the northwest. Now, temperatures will be peaking at 20 degrees for Winnipeg today. Usually we're around a seasonal of 23. Heading west to Brandon, it is 11 and partly cloudy at the moment. Today you should be anticipating a mix of sun and clouds with a chance of showers later and possibility of a thunderstorm also in the forecast. The winds will be light and then become breezier throughout the day. Highs around 19. Thompson is currently at 5 degrees, seeing some light rain showers at this moment. Today, expect a mix of sun and clouds along with chance of showers later in the day. Temperatures will reach highs of 17. For the north in Churchill, it is 4 degrees under mostly sunny skies. Today's forecast calls for a mix of sun and clouds, a 60% chance of morning rain, possibly mixed with freezing rain sometime this morning, and the winds will be from Dunn North, high +3. Down in Dauphin, it's 12 with light rain at the moment. Today's calling for a mix of sun and clouds and a chance of showers and a risk of thunderstorm later this afternoon. Expect temperatures near 20 degrees. Gimli's at 13 and cloudy. For the Interlake region today, expect a mix of sun and clouds and a chance of showers in the afternoon and a risk of thunderstorm later. For those that reported morning fog earlier, it will be dissipating and the high will reach 20. Steinbach is at 12. Morris also at 12, enjoying clear skies at the moment. The forecast says a mix of sun and clouds and a chance. 21 for Steinbach, the high, and 26 for Morris.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Corey Funk, the commute.
Yeah, commute's been pretty quiet so far, but if you do see something going on out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, give me a call on that CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing. That number 204-788-3093.
And can we please cheer for the Y yesterday?
Yes.
Yay! We're back in studio, but I just want to thank once again the Downtown YMYWCA for letting us, be there. We had our community studio there, and we had a full show.
We were packing up, and we were just buzzing about all the wonderful people who joined us on air. They were just great. So many lovely stories.
It is right now time to find out about business news with Crystal Ramlakan. Hi there.
Hey, good morning, Marcy.
So inflation in the United States is easing, but its central bank is holding interest rates steady for now. What will that mean for Canada here? What will it mean?
Well, this means that monetary policies at the Bank of Canada and the U.S. Federal Reserve are diverging right now, and experts say it could set the Canadian dollar up for volatility down the road. So in a widely expected move, the Fed held its key interest rate steady yesterday, a week after the Bank of Canada announced a cut. And if the Bank of Canada's rate falls too far below the Fed's, it could negatively affect the loonie. It would make imports from the U.S., Canada's biggest trading partner, more expensive and put upward pressure on inflation. Now, some analysts say if the Bank of Canada cuts a few times and the Fed holds, it won't be an issue. But if the Bank of Canada keeps cutting and the Fed holds past the first quarter of next year, then it could be a different story. Here's Scott Anderson, who is the chief U.S. economist at BMO Capital Markets.
Inflation's been stubbornly slow to recede, and the central banks are going to take their time. The Fed doesn't want to make a mistake of cutting too early. If they're on the balance of risk, they'd rather they can take a slower growth outlook without too much of a hit. But if they allowed the inflation genie out of the bottle again, it would do a lot to damage their credibility.
Now, the U.S. economy has been more resilient than expected in the face of higher borrowing costs and inflation. It's a different story here in Canada, where we saw our first interest rate cut in more than 4 years last week after a steep hiking cycle aimed at tamping down inflation. And Governor Tiff Macklem has acknowledged there are limits to how far the Bank of Canada can diverge from the U.S., but he has said we're not close to those limits yet.
Let's go to a story about the media business. There's more cuts happening. Where now?
Yeah, that's right. So Chorus Entertainment has announced layoffs at Global News. The parent company is blaming the current economic and regulatory reality for media organizations. So far, CBC News has learned that more than 24 people have been let go from their jobs, 13 in Calgary, 8 in Edmonton, 1 in Vancouver, 3 in Lethbridge. And CBC News has also confirmed journalists were laid off in the Ottawa Bureau. Now, an internal memo distributed to Global News employees said the changes are designed to prepare the news division for more economic pressure as the industry continues to evolve, as larger international tech giants offer content and advertising platforms directly to Canadians. So last week, Chorus announced some of its programming arrangements with Warner Brothers Discovery would not be renewed next year. And then on Monday, Rogers said it had signed multi-year deals with Warner Brothers Discovery and NBC Universal for their popular lifestyle and entertainment brands in Canada, including HGTV and the Food Network. Last month, Canada's broadcasting regulator also granted Chorus's request to ease some of its Canadian content spending requirements after the company warned of an increasingly dire financial situation.
And finally, before we look at the markets this morning, why are some candy makers migrating north from the States to Canada?
Yeah, well, costly U.S. sugar tariffs are driving business north. So last fall, Hershey repurchased a factory outside of Ottawa in Smiths Falls that had closed more than a decade earlier. Blommer Chocolate is expanding in Ontario while it shutters an 85-year-old Chicago plant. And the maker of Oreo says it has invested $250 million in Ontario manufacturing facilities in the last few years. So Canada has managed to attract hundreds of millions of dollars of investment in recent years. Some of that can be attributed to a rising population, but many in the industry say it's the long-standing protectionist measures south of the border. So the U.S. sugar industry is heavily protected, and buyers can only import certain amounts of sugar before incurring hefty tariffs. The regulations are intended to protect U.S. farmer profits and prevent other countries from flooding the market. But critics say it also keeps U.S. sugar prices artificially high, burdening American companies and refineries. So that's making it sweeter for companies to make candy and cookies here in Canada and then ship them to U.S. consumers. Labor and energy are also cheaper because of the exchange rate.
Interesting story. What's going on in markets this morning? What do you see?
So in Europe, stocks are falling as markets assess the U.S. outlook. Germany, the UK, and France are all down right now. In Asia, markets are largely on the rise. Japan, Shanghai are both down still. Hong Kong is up. Oil is down 74 cents to 77.77 U.S. per barrel. Gold is down 21.30 to $2,333.50 U.S. per ounce. And the dollar is down almost a tenth of a cent to 72.78 cents U.S.
All right, Crystal Ramlicam, we'll talk to you tomorrow here on the show, as always.
Okay, thanks, Marcy.
Joining us daily via Zoom, Crystal Ramlicam with Business News. Time right now is 13 minutes to 7 o'clock. And coming up next on CBC, let's get more information about what continues to develop as one of the top stories in our province. Plans are underway to start a search at Prairie Green landfill this summer, as you may have heard in the news. The remains of Morgan Harris and Mercedes Myron are believed to have been taken to that landfill after they were killed by the man who is now on trial for first-degree murder in their deaths. The trial just wrapped up. Both women were from Long Plain First Nation, where Kyra Wilson has served as this former chief. She's been calling for a search for a long time and spoke with Canada Tonight host Travis Danraj about her reaction to the news.
I think it's excellent news that the search is going to begin. I know that we've had plans in place. There were 2 reports that were written. There was a lot of work that was done to actually showcase the operations of what a landfill search would look like. So right now, it was just a matter of when and what that was going to look like.
What do you make of the fact that this, has been going on now for 2 years? There have been calls for the landfill to be searched, and finally now a commitment that it's going to happen.
I think the biggest thing for me is just that sense of relief for the families and being happy for them that, there's some sense of closure, I would imagine. Also that sense of relief for them as well, that the search is going to begin. This is a long time coming, actually. It's almost been close to 2 years, or about a year and a half, that we've been waiting for something. So now that it's starting to happen, it's overwhelming, but also very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, this could take a very long time. The Premier said it could go into 2026, and there are no guarantees, there are no firm guarantees that any remains will be found. Are you concerned about that? And do you think that the families will get that closure that they're looking for if remains are not found?
Well, I guess the biggest thing is the families were wanting just to move forward with this, and they feel that, they will find their loved ones. And that's the biggest thing is that hope and that love that we surround all of our families that are impacted by MMIWG2S, or, the boys and men that are still a part of that as well. So it's been a big movement across this country, across the world, actually, in regards to this landfill search. And now that it is beginning and the work is starting, it will be interesting to see how quickly we can get this done, but obviously safely.
And to pick up on the point that you just made, what does this story about these women's remains being in a landfill and a search going on say about the larger kind of picture of murdered and missing Indigenous women in this country?
Well, they always say that we are stronger when we come together. There's strength in numbers, and that's exactly what we had to do to make sure that we were heard at the table when we were speaking with, the chief of police at the time, as well as the different levels of government. There was so much that we had to do to advocate, and so many leaders came together, First Nations leaders, and so many allies all across the world came together. So everyone worked really hard to show that Indigenous women, First Nations women, matter in our society. And that's what we see today is this landfill search to bring these women home.
It's interesting that it took an Indigenous premier to make this finally happen.
Well, I think the biggest thing is that we weren't going to go away. We were always going to fight. So whoever was going to be in that seat, and I'm glad we do have an Indigenous premier, that we were going to get this landfill search done. So that was the biggest thing, is that persistence in terms of getting the search done. And that's why we see this landfill search begin today.
Kyra, what needs to be done here to prevent incidents like this from happening again?
There are a number of different things that I can think of off the top of my head where, we need more resources for anyone that's struggling with homelessness, anyone that might be struggling with addictions or mental health. People need to feel supported and loved when they are struggling. So we definitely need to see more resources in our urban areas, but also in our First Nations communities. That's the biggest thing. But I also believe that, we are just coming together and showing that, we will always support one another when we are dealing with different hardships.
So that was Kyra Wilson, the former chief of Long Plain First Nation, speaking last night on CBC with host Travis Donraj on Canada Tonight. Well, let's stay with this story because yesterday in Manitoba, loved ones of the women were given a tour of the site where their work will be done, where the search will be happening. As you know, Premier Wab Kinew announcing the license approval already to search Prairie Green had already been completed. So the next stage is to complete a pilot search, is their language, and build temporary support buildings at the site. Elle Harris is Morgan Harris's daughter. Melissa Robinson is Morgan's cousin. And both of them spoke to CBC's Josh Crabb about what it felt like to know that finally the search will begin in earnest. Here's some of what they said, starting with Elle Harris.
I think I was left very speechless. I had no words. I'm still kind of trying to process it after seeing everything and seeing that construction's being built and the land's being removed from the topsoils and seeing everything actually happening. It's very overwhelming because we've been fighting for 2 years, and it's weird, and it's going to be weird not to fight. It has been exhausting mentally and physically. So I did finally have a really peaceful sleep last night after 2 years.
Mm-hmm. It's definitely overtaken our lives. George and I, my husband and I, were reflecting last night. And literally exactly what Elle said, it was like that weight was lifted off of our shoulders. And, since Morgan went missing just over 2 years ago, it was like, where do we go from here now? And, it was a good feeling though. So yesterday, those were happy tears.
So I understand you were part of a group that went to visit Prairie Green. Can you just tell us a little bit about that experience, Melissa?
It was a lot to process and see that, work was taking place. Yet here we were just the day before outside the law courts chanting, do your job, Wab, and here he has been. So we were very happy, as a whole, as a family, with our supports there, Grand Chief, AMC, to see that they've taken it upon themselves rather than us pushing them to go and do it. And, the work has begun.
What did you see at that site? What were you shown?
Well, we first went to Spring Hill in Headingley. It's a lumber yard where they're building that healing lodge for us. Because in the feasibility and the operational, we talked about, a space for our family and where we can sit and be present, right, as that work is happening. And, so we went and saw that first, got to, walk through and see the layout and how that's going to look for us. And then the bus took us over to Prairie Green, where we were taken up by that same bus, just beside the cell that my cousin Morgan is laying in. And we had ceremony with WAB. And, we were allowed as much time as we wanted to sit up there. And I took a chair and I sat down and I just sat there for a while, just overlooking that area and talking to her. And, because I think back to when we went there a year and a half ago, being so emotional and being so struck with the idea that she was laying there. And here we are now, delivering that promise that we're going to be bringing her home. And at this point, that's all that matters, right? Like nothing in this world matters at this very moment, but to bring her home and to lay her to rest properly.
That's Melissa Robinson and Elle Harris speaking to the CBC's Josh Crabb. And when it comes to the trial itself, obviously they're talking about the search now. But when it comes to the trial itself, Chief Justice Glenn Joyal has reserved his decision, but he is expected to deliver the verdict, his verdict on July 11th. Right now, it is 4 minutes to 7 o'clock. It is June 13th, Thursday morning. Thanks for being with us. And Heather Wells is here with other headlines.
Good morning. Well, it was all eyes to the skies through the afternoon and last evening. Environment and Climate Change Canada confirms multiple tornadoes touched down. The system started in western Manitoba and then moved southeast. Meteorologist Dan Fulton says the exact number of confirmed tornadoes is not yet known. However, it is likely to be about 4 or 5, and there was some damage, he says, to the powwow grounds at Swan Lake First Nation. So we'll hear more about that. And taking away a person's rights is supposed to be a last resort in this province when someone is unable to care for themselves. But a CBC News investigation spoke to several people who say they were placed under the care of the public guardian and trustee of Manitoba when they shouldn't have been. We're going to hear from the I-Team in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Caroline Bargood is actually going to be in the next hour of the program with more on that story as well. In addition, ahead on the show this morning, she is all about celebrating and volunteering in the paw. Karen Gallagher, she's a mega volunteer. She's also got a knack for putting out fires, literally. She's a volunteer firefighter, and she's just an incredible mentor. She's one of 10 CBC Future 40 Under 40 finalists that were announced this week, and we're going to hear in the next hour about what drives her to help her community. As well, after 7 o'clock in studio, a Winnipegger who survived her eating disorder. She says she believes new screening guidelines for primary care providers could be life-saving. So stay tuned. We'll have that interview ahead as well. It's all coming up on your morning show. This is Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or YouTube. If you're on YouTube, you're seeing a beautiful sunny sky in downtown Winnipeg this morning. And we're going to have that for the early part of the day. This afternoon, once again, 30% chance of showers and a risk of a thunderstorm. The high in Winnipeg today is 20 degrees, so we're about 3 degrees below normal. And right now we're starting with 13. On your morning commute, the person to call is Corey Funk. And right now the phone line's been quiet, so hopefully you're having a safe drive, walk, or roll. 788-3093 is where you can call if you need us. Also, we're inviting you to call us with any storm reports from last night. If you have photos to share, radio893@cbc.ca. Or if you heard something or saw something significant in the Southwest, as Heather was mentioning, we'd love to hear your story this morning. And hopefully you didn't have property or land suffer damage. But you can always call us on the live line, 204-780-0893.
Today on The Current.
Lunchtime!
I'm Duncan McHugh. Lunch hour used to be co-worker social hour for many Canadians, a time to relax, eat, and chat with colleagues. Now, fewer workers are going out for a midday meal, and it's affecting businesses and culture too. Coming up on The Current.
The Current. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report.
Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. A New Jersey man is sharing a cautionary tale for police in Ontario. Najir Parks was wrongfully arrested over a facial recognition mismatch. As Thomas Daigle reports, that same technology is now being used by investigators in the Toronto area.
In my head, he doesn't look anything like me.
Najir Parks was arrested 5 years ago for a theft and assault he didn't commit. According to a lawsuit, investigators identified him using facial recognition technology from the French tech firm Idemia. Parks spent 10 days in a New Jersey jail, mistaken for another black man pictured on a fake driver's license.
I'm like, so he basically telling me we all look alike because he doesn't look anything like me.
Now, police in Peel and York regions near Toronto have announced they too are using the same brand of facial recognition software. They insist the system will be used only to generate leads and won't serve as the sole basis for an arrest.
Trained investigator will have to validate the match.
Constable Kevin Nabria speaks for York Regional Police.
We're going to look at the match and see if that supports other evidence that we've obtained.
Facial recognition technology does have shortcomings, with studies suggesting it's more prone to misidentifying racialized people. McGill University researcher Yuan Stevens points out it depends how the algorithms are refined.
And it can produce skewed results that exacerbate long-standing inequities in society.
Idemia disputes allegations of bias in its software. As for Parks, his charges were dropped, and he has this message for Ontario police now using that facial recognition system.
There's clear evidence that it doesn't work.
Thomas Daigle, CBC News, Toronto.
NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says Russia is trying to destabilize member countries, and they're stepping up efforts to defend themselves.
We have seen several examples of sabotage, of arson attempts, of cyber attacks, of disinformation, and we will also then work on NATO response options.
He's speaking this morning in Brussels. Representatives of the 56 countries arming Ukraine are meeting today. Defense Minister Bill Blair is there. As Abby Dawson tells us, he says Canada is finding ways to send more weapons to the front lines.
This group has provided approximately $100 billion in military assistance to Ukraine as it fights for its freedom and its sovereignty.
Minister of National Defense Bill Blair arrived to meet with his counterparts in Brussels by announcing further support for Ukraine.
Canada will provide Ukraine with 2,300 Canadian Rocket Vehicle 7s, or CRV rocket motors.
They've already been decommissioned in Canada, but Blair says they've been tested for viability after Ukraine's armed forces requested them.
We intend to ship more packages of these motors to our Ukrainian partners in the future.
From its surplus stock, he says Canada will deliver 29 Nanook remote weapon systems as well. These can be mounted on different types of armored vehicles. Ottawa says it has already provided $14 billion in assistance to Ukraine. But deterrence is a NATO priority too, and spending 2% of GDP on defense remains an alliance target. Canada is the only member that has not publicly shared a plan to reach that goal. As of right now, Ottawa would fall short by the decade's end, only shelling out 1.76%. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg says he'll soon publish a new report on where all member states stand.
So it reflects that the allies are taking this seriously. It will be important also as a message from the Washington summit on burden sharing.
That's the annual NATO summit being held in a few weeks, where some of what's being discussed today will land on the leaders' tables in D.C. Abby Dawson, CBC News, Berlin.
Ukraine's fight to repel the Russian invasion is also on the minds of leaders at the G7 summit in Italy. One of the things they are discussing is how to use frozen Russian assets to fund Ukraine's military. As Rafi Boudjikanian tells us, the program could be worth billions.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was greeted by his Italian counterpart Giorgia Meloni in Fasano, Italy. This year, the world's foremost economies say helping Ukraine repel Russia is a big focus. That means both military aid but also money to help the Eastern European country buy weapons. And some of that money will come from frozen Russian assets. During these talks, the G7 is expected to finalize plans to deliver this money. In total, the group is expected to pay out $69 billion. A Canadian government official says for its part, Ottawa could contribute $5 billion in funding from frozen Russian assets. Trudeau will also meet Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky today, who is a guest at the G7. Rafi Bujikani on CBC News, Bari, Italy.
The United Nations Refugee Agency says a record number of people were forcibly displaced in the past year. A new report out this morning says conflicts in Sudan, the Middle East, and Myanmar are the root cause. It's calling for urgent action. Sylvia Saya works with the agency in the Democratic Republic of Congo.
C'est beaucoup plus la population qui subit les astres de conflit. Il y a la séparation.
She says the impact of the conflict is heavily felt by civilians. Families are separated, children can't go to school, and food is more complicated to find. Saya says it forces people to lean on humanitarian aid. This is the 12th consecutive year the UN has reported a rise in the number of forcibly displaced people. It has nearly tripled since 2012. Some harsh austerity measures are about to take effect in Argentina. They were proposed by Libertarian President Javier Milei, and Argentina's Senate has been voting on them throughout the night. The measures are unpopular with the public. As senators were voting yesterday, police were using water cannon and tear gas to try to control some violent demonstrations. Protesters hurled sticks, stones, and Molotov cocktails at police. Milei's reforms lower the income tax threshold. They also give the president broad legislative powers over energy, pensions, and security. Milei says the changes are required to address inflation in Argentina. It is approaching 300% annually. BC has finalized details to provide a minimum wage and basic protections for gig workers. It would cover people who work for app-based companies like Uber and Skip the Dishes. The Provincial Ministry of Labour says the regulations are a first in Canada. It says the changes address workers' top concerns like low and unpredictable pay, tip protection, and lack of compensation. The new rules set minimum wage for the time a worker is engaged in a job at $20.88 per hour. That dollar amount is meant to offset the time workers spend waiting between assignments. The regulations take effect in BC September 3rd. Celine Dion may be Canada's best-known singer, but she can no longer do the things she loves most. The international superstar has a disease that is slowly eroding her voice, and she spoke to CBC's chief correspondent Adrian Arsenault in Las Vegas.
There were nights when the wind was so cold.
Should you wonder why Celine Dion is now opening up after being quiet for so long about the illness that for nearly 2 decades has been eating away at her voice? Well, she says it comes down to being tired of the lies.
And lying for so many years. I have a tonsillitis, a sinus infection, but that was far from that. I couldn't live with the lie.
She lied when she canceled concerts, lied about why her voice was croaking or behaving oddly because she didn't know for all that time that she had a rare and punishing illness.
There were days when the sun was so cruel.
Stiff person syndrome can cause muscular spasms so harsh it can break bones. And when we sat down recently to talk in Las Vegas, she said this has happened to her and it's agonizing.
When you get in spasms so much, well, you don't remember everything. It can last a moment, it can last a few hours. It's not just like a spasm in the calf in the middle of the night. It's pretty painful.
A global superstar, yes, but also a mom. She has 3 sons. Her twins are 13. And what we're learning now is that they are being taught how to help Celine. Panic buttons in her home, drills to get medical intervention when the spasms hit. What she's going through is a lot to take in for her, for them, for her fans. But this is where she starts opening up. She wants to, and she needs to. Adrian Arsenault, CBC News, Las Vegas.
You can now stream that exclusive English-Canadian interview on CBC Gem on the National's YouTube page and watch it tonight on the National. Celine Dion, I Will Sing Again, is a 1-hour primetime special airing Friday at 8 p.m. on CBC television. That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, some beautiful sunshine now in downtown Winnipeg as we have a calm after the storm yesterday, or I should say storms. Heather Wells in a moment to tell us exactly what happened in Manitoba. Good morning, everyone. I'm Marcy Marcusa. It's Thursday. It is June 13th, and thanks for joining us on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. Well, in addition to hearing more about the storm system, this hour on the program, we are going to be hearing a story from the CBC I-Team. Imagine waking up in the hospital and learning that a government agency has taken over your life. Caroline Bargut is going to be here to talk about the I-Team's investigation into the public guardian and trustees, so stay tuned. Also, earlier this week on the show, you might have heard an interview about the new guidelines that would see primary care doctors screen all teenagers for eating disorders. We're going to talk with someone who has survived an eating disorder herself and says this is a step in the right direction. Right now, though, let's find out more about what happened in Manitoba with the weather yesterday. Hi, Heather.
Hi, good morning. Well, twisting, turning, and touching down. Environment Canada confirms 4 or 5 tornadoes touched down yesterday. The system started in western Manitoba and then moved southeast. Meteorologist Dan Fulton says the exact number of confirmed tornadoes is not known yet, but likely to be around 4 or 5. He does say there was some damage to the powwow grounds at Swan Lake First Nation. So we'll hear more about what happened in all that severe weather yesterday. The youngest daughter of Morgan Harris is relieved the province is mounting a search effort for her mother's remains. It's been more than 2 years since Harris and Mercedes Myron were killed and put in a dumpster. Elle Harris visited the Prairie Green landfill this week to tour the search site, and she says she's finally been able to have a good night's sleep. We're going to hear more in our next local news at 7:30.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's get into what's going on with the weather this morning. Abby, when I was driving in, I noticed this, I would keep calling it the calm after the storm, but the sky was actually beautiful. This clouds this morning were almost like if you took a row of cotton candy,
cotton candy,
and you rolled it into a line. That's what it looked like this puffy shelf with blue above it.
I think you just call it the puffy shelf. That's what we should call
It's
it.
technical. It's a technical meteorological term. A puffy shelf of clouds this morning.
Yep. Right now it is 13 in Winnipeg. We're starting off the day with some sunny conditions. We're expecting a mix of sun and clouds by the afternoon period with a chance of showers later. There's also a risk of thunderstorm later in the day, and expect a breezy day with the winds coming from the northwest. Now today's high will be at 20. Tonight it's going to be partly cloudy, a chance of showers in the evening, and then we'll see some thunderstorm maybe, and it's going to be clearing up by the morning period. But right now it is 13 in Winnipeg and it's sunny.
Corey Funk, how's the commute?
Very quiet so far, but if you're out there, if you're walking, biking, driving, you see something going on, give me a call on that CBC commuter line. I'll let folks know what you're seeing. 204-788-3093.
Well, let's build on what Heather just mentioned about the tornadoes. At least 4, as she said, maybe 5, touching down in southwestern Manitoba yesterday. Heather was confirmed that earlier this morning when she spoke with Environment Canada, and we expect some more details coming out throughout the day, of course. Now, one of these, though, we know was in Swan Lake First Nation, and it did cause some damage. From our news department, CBC's Megan Ketcherson spoke with Grand Chief Jason Daniels moments ago.
Around 6 o'clock, we started to see cloud formations. I had already left the community on the way back to Winnipeg. That's where I live. But the council members were in the community watching the storm, making sure that they could alert the community if needed. And it did touch down on the west side of our community, and then it went along the valley and kind of touched down close to our Powwow Arbor, where we have our annual powwow at the end of June. So yeah, it's going to be I think 13 days from now. So yeah, we have a few days to get everything cleaned up. But I'm in the community will come together, and they're already preparing already last night, and we've been talking about it as the leadership, the plans, and we're planning for the big event, our 26th powwow. So just trying to make sure that Any other damage that we didn't see yesterday, that we can make sure that, anything is cleaned up or it's repaired. And we did have an elder's house that had sustained some damage to the roof. So there is some plans to get that, fixed up right away for him. Yeah. So
was that?
Yeah,
like,
it was a scary day.
So did the what kind of damage to the roof? Did it take it off, or did it just holes? Or?
Yeah, a little bit of it was lifting from one of the sides of the roof there, and so it just needs to we have aluminum roofs, so it's a little bit better in regards to water damage and all that, but it did sustain some damage as well, and the tin on the arbor as well, and actually the sheeting was all lifted up and thrown around. So it was a very strong storm that came through.
And besides those two, that's as far as what you know, as far as damage to buildings in the community?
Yes, very fortunate. If it would have went, a few 100 meters north, I think we would have had some more damages to housing, and that would have been a lot more serious. So we're very grateful, thankful that it didn't hit any populated areas of the community.
And have you experienced this before in Swan Lake?
Yeah, I think, as a child, I remember a number of tornadoes that came through the area. One actually hit the town of Manitoba, and then it bounced over Swan Lake First Nation, and then it hit Swan Lake, the town, and then also the Somerset town. And we were fortunate at that time. I was just riding my bike around the community at that time. But there has been some tornadoes, but as I guess we see more of the climate changing, it's getting more, common to see these types of events coming up, in southern Canada now.
So that was a conversation that from our newsroom, CBC's Megan Ketcherson had at right around 7 a.m. this morning with the chief of Swan Lake First Nation, Jason Daniels, talking about some of the damage that was caused as a tornado touched down there yesterday. Environment Canada has confirmed to CBC News that we've had 4, maybe 5 touchdowns. Heather will have as much as we know this morning coming up at 7:30 in your next news. 7:18 is the time right now. It is partly cloudy and 13 degrees, a high of 20. As Abby's been mentioning, we have a slight chance we'll see some showers this afternoon once again. Well, next on the show, a Winnipeg woman says she hopes new guidelines for screening eating disorders help. She says they're a step in the right direction for sure. The Canadian Pediatric Society, as you heard in an interview earlier this week, is urging doctors now to screen young people for eating disorders during their routine visits. They say that doctors should be checking for things like unexplained weight changes, delays in puberty, and restrictive eating patterns. With a major surge in eating disorder cases since the pandemic, it is meant to try and catch cases earlier. My next guest is Kelly Summerfield. When she was a teen in the 90s, she says she struggled herself with an eating disorder, but she was lucky. She had a doctor who was understanding of the disease and actually ahead of the curve in terms of having conversations. That is not usually the case. 20 years later, Kelly has recovered from her eating disorder, and she's now a registered professional counselor. Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for being here. So your doctor actually, how old were you when your doctor addressed this with you?
So I was in my early 20s, but I had a family doctor who actually delivered me. So we had quite a long relationship, and she was my mom's doctor as well. So I think she also had kind of that bond with our family, so a real connection, which I don't think really exists in the healthcare system very often anymore. And I had struggled with an eating disorder and had an attempted suicide. Mm-hmm. And I was on a wait list for getting into the eating disorder program, but it was at the time, 20 years ago, a 2-year wait list. And there isn't a lot of services, and back then there was even less. And because of that, she took it upon herself to see me on a regular basis. weekly, monthly, whatever I needed. I had appointments with her as a check-in to kind of bridge me until I could get into the program.
That's amazing that you had that. As you alluded to, most people don't have that. Thus, these guidelines. What did you think when you heard this news that now the Canadian Pediatric Society is recommending this screening for everyone?
Finally. Why haven't we already? Like, why hasn't this been in place already? 20 years ago, it should have been. And now here we are. Finally. Yeah, that's all I could say about that, really. Like,
what's the most greatest misconception people have about eating disorders? And I know a little bit about this, having helped out with a large conference here, but I was just surprised that some of those things still stick. So from your perspective, what do you think the biggest misconception is?
Size. Really. We have an idea of what it should look like, and that's not always the case. So weight, it doesn't matter what size you actually are. You can be any size and struggling. Gender, you can be man or female and struggling. So those are probably two of the biggest ones. Just because someone looks a certain way doesn't mean that they're okay. We need to be asking questions. We need to be checking on people's mental health and seeing if they're struggling or not. It's not a matter of just saying, oh, they are in the right size that they should be.
People often also make they take the issue of size and they say, well, you're doing this somehow. They almost make it like a victim blame thing, I've heard, right? You're doing this so you can look this way. Just stop it. Eat something. People simplify this and really don't understand this is a mental health disorder. Can you elaborate on how that was for you? Like sort of what prompted that with your mental health when you were struggling?
My eating disorder developed when I was in my late teens. I had lost my grandfather when I was in high school, and that was really impactful for me. It kind of shifted my whole kind of world. That was my only living grandfather, and my life felt really out of control. And so going into an eating disorder wasn't about how I looked. It wasn't about, that's a small portion of it, really. It was more about how can I control what this chaos around me is. And so to hear the statistics of eating disorders becoming even more prevalent in teens after COVID, that makes sense. Because what did we lose during COVID? Control of everything in our life, right? And so to hear that there is even more struggle makes sense, because these teens who had very little things to control have now lost everything. So what can we control when we are, 12, 13, 14, 15? What we eat.
It's interesting as well, because when you pair that with the fact that everyone went fully visual, all of a sudden everyone was on Zoom, and then they introduced filters to alter how you look. How do you think that might have impacted people who might be struggling with an eating disorder?
Huge. Yeah, absolutely. That now I grew up in the era of Kate Moss, in these models that were extremely thin, and that had a huge impact. Lots of magazines, but I had a choice of whether or not I purchased those, right? That is very different now, where everywhere you look, you're on a screen and you're seeing these people that don't look like what you're seeing. And it's hard. When we see an image in a magazine, you can say, oh, was it filtered? Was it altered? Right? Mm-hmm. But now on a screen, we're like, is it altered? Is there? No, probably it is all false. But these women or these children are seeing it and thinking that that's what they could look like, that's attainable, but it's really not.
I think the thing that stayed with me from having talked to someone like yourself who, had been through an eating disorder, and she talked about wrestling with it, and she described it mentally for her as almost like it was like she said it was like a separate person that was pressing on her in her brain everything would be sort of like a black pool pulling her towards, doing that. And she'd be fighting it. Like it would be like fighting it constantly.
Yeah.
Do you relate to that idea of that, like that struggle being prevalent prevalent as you were trying to, get through recovery?
For me, the best way that I can describe it, again, isn't about the weight. And I'm so glad that you're bringing that up too. But for me, I'm an empathetic person, and I take on everybody else's stuff. And so I want to listen to everybody. So I would describe it as like a big jar. And so during the day, I would fill this jar with everybody else's stuff. And at the end of the day, I would go home and purge. And that would be my way of letting go of that heaviness that I collected all day long. And that was the relief.
Before you go this morning, Kelly, and what would you say to any teens struggling who are listening right now, might be going through their own struggles?
Thank you. That's a great question. That there is hope. That you don't have to continue to struggle, that there are people out there that can help you, that can support you. That is why I have decided to become a therapist myself, so that I can provide services, because we know that they're lacking, that these teens can reach out and get support, that you do not have to do it alone. I think that was the biggest thing for me, was having that doctor while I waited for those services, that I could go and see, that I didn't feel alone when I was really in the depths of despair.
And there's no cost, too, right?
And to go see my doctor, it was free.
So these guidelines will go a long way. Thank you very much for coming in with and speaking with us this morning. Nice to have you on CBC.
Thank you, Marcy.
That was Kelly Summerfield, eating disorder survivor, registered professional counselor now, sharing her reaction to the changes this week. The Canadian Pediatric Society urging doctors to screen teens for eating disorders during routine visits. It is 7:27 a.m. on 89.3, 13 degrees, partly cloudy after the storms last night. And Khalil Hassan Ali is in again for Scott Regehr with sports. Hi there.
Good morning, Marcy.
So the Bombers are going to try to get their first win of the season tonight.
Definitely.
But we're missing some key pieces in the team, right?
Yeah, we already knew that top receiver Kenny Lawler would be out. However, there was still a possibility of Brady Oliveira, who would be able to play. Yesterday, though, it was made official that Oliveira is out for at least this game. In his place, veteran Johnny Augustine slots in. He has spent his entire CFL career with the blue and gold, mainly as a backup to Oliveira, although he's made a handful of starts before. Given that, Augustine was asked about his nerves heading into tonight's game.
Those are just natural butterflies. I mean, they've kind of diminished over the years. To me, it's just another game, especially when you've played the big game 4 times in a row. That's the biggest butterfly you can get. So I try to not think about that stuff. And honestly, like every game after the first play, you're like, okay, I'm just playing football at this point.
Makes sense that there would be more nerves heading into a Grey Cup versus a regular season matchup. Also, for those who might have missed it, the CFL has left it up to teams to decide whether or not to use the new microchip balls on the field, as well as conversions after touchdown attempts. Given the rather vocal opposition from kickers, including Sergio Castillo, safe to say the Bombers won't be using the new ball in those circumstances. Kickoff tonight, Marcy, is at 6:30.
Let's talk hockey in the race for the Stanley Cup. How are the Edmonton Oilers taking a mindful approach, I guess is how they've described it, to getting back into this series against Florida? They got to do it tonight.
They do. They have to get back to it tonight. It's by taking the large picture and really breaking it down into small aspects. So the Oilers, they have a mindfulness coach. His name is George Mumford. Players have all the physical tools, as we know, to succeed. But there's an acknowledgement that the mind plays a big part of the preparation process. And we, as individuals, might not have all of the tools to get the best out of ourselves mentally. And that's where Mumford comes in for Edmonton. He ensures the players don't get overwhelmed by the thoughts and also doubts which might creep in.
How we interpret things has everything to do with how we perform. What really happened, we played the Panthers and they won the 2 games on their ice. Now it's our turn to win our 2 games. So that's the only thing that's happened. But we interpret it in ways where, we're in a lot of stress or, we're down or whatever. And that puts us on the defensive. That puts us in survival mode instead of looking at it for what it is, which is just an opportunity for us to get even.
You can hear George Mumford's full conversation about mindfulness with Dr. Brian Goldman on The Dose. It's on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts. Tonight, Oilers' next chance to get one game back on the Panthers, and they might be facing a jet-lagged team as well. That's because of severe weather in South Florida. The Cats were delayed landing in Edmonton until late last night. It's a 4,000-kilometer journey across 2 time zones, Marcy.
Well, let's end with golf. The third major of the year for the men tees off today. Who are some of the players you're watching?
Let's go for Tiger Woods, Scotty Scheffler. Those are some of the favorites always, but also looking at a couple of Canadians. There's 6 in the field, and they're going to be pushing not only for the win, but also for world ranking points to get them towards the Olympics, hopefully, in one of the 2 spots for Canada.
All right, Khalil, thank you.
Thank you so much, Marcy.
That's Khalil Hassanali filling in for Scott Reguer this morning with sports on CBC. Your commute, by the way, is cooperating so far. If not, call us 788-3093. And right after the news this morning, we've been meeting the Future 40 Under 40 finalists from CBC Manitoba all week. An impressive list of Manitobans who shape our province. We're going to hear from one of those folks, a volunteer firefighter who is all about giving back to the paw. Stay tuned. That's after your CBC Winnipeg news.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it is sunny. We'll see a few clouds roll in this afternoon. And again, a slight chance of a shower, maybe a thunderstorm. Cooler today, a high of 20. Well, it was all eyes to the skies through the afternoon and last evening. Video of a funnel cloud recorded in Swan Lake, south of Winnipeg, and in fact it was a tornado. Environment and Climate Change Canada confirming multiple tornadoes touched down. The system started in western Manitoba and then moved southeast. Now, Swan Lake First Nation this morning is assessing the damage. Chief Jason Daniels says the tornado tore the Powwow Arbor apart around 6 o'clock last night. He says the only other damage appears to be an elder's roof.
Lifting from one of the sides of the roof there, we have aluminum roofs, so it's a little bit better in regards to water damage and all that, but it did sustain some damage as well. And the tin on the arbor as well, actually the sheeting was all lifted up and thrown around.
Daniel says the community will have to come together to rebuild the arbor before its annual powwow. That happens June 28th. And he says, fortunately, no one was hurt. Now, Environment and Climate Change Canada meteorologist Dan Fulton says the exact number of confirmed tornadoes isn't known yet, but it's likely around 4 or 5.
We heard of some damage to the powwow grounds near the Swan Lake First Nation. That's the most we've heard so far for the tornadoes. There's a bit of damage in, like I said, in Morden Winkler area, some wind damage there, but that wasn't produced by a tornado. So I think we were pretty lucky in that these guys mostly stayed in the agricultural areas and kind of avoided the population centers as it made its way through western Manitoba.
Fulton says the reports of tornadoes came from Rivers, Rapid City, and Boulder. And while a tornado was not reported in Morden Winkler, Fulton says they did get golf ball-sized hail and strong winds. In other news, family gathered for a vigil last night to remember the father who died after being stabbed near his son's elementary school in downtown Winnipeg. Ricky Manchese died Tuesday. The assault happened around noon on Kennedy near Cumberland. Manchese's wife, Shirley Perot, says her husband of 15 years was funny, outgoing, and had a passion for drumming and music.
I feel lost, heartbroken. I haven't slept, and I can't get the image and the sound of Rick in pain.
Perot says they were walking home to meet their 12-year-old son for lunch when they were approached by an aggressive man with a knife. He fled the scene, and police say no one has been arrested. The youngest daughter of Morgan Harris was flooded with emotion to see the work already done to prepare for a search for her mother's remains. It has been more than 2 years since Harris and Mercedes Myron were killed and put in a dumpster. Al Harris visited the healing lodge that is being built for families, and she also toured the site at the Prairie Green landfill.
It's very overwhelming knowing that my mom's body, we're all practically standing on it when we're there. It's very hard to think of because, you know, when you go to a gravesite, you're always taught, don't step on the graves, don't step on them. Those are people. And here we are all stepping on her.
Harris is relieved she doesn't have to fight for a search any longer. On Saturday, the Harris family is holding a powwow in her honor at Camp Morgan at the Brady Road landfill. Taking away a person's rights is supposed to be a last resort in this province when someone is unable to care for themselves. But a CBC News investigation spoke to several people who say they were placed under the care of the public guardian and trustee of Manitoba when they shouldn't have been. George Kinsman had a medical incident in 2022 and was placed under guardianship. He has been struggling to get out ever since.
I'm absolutely normal. I can run, I can jump, I can play. I'm not mentally incapacitated whatsoever.
More than 2,700 Manitobans are under the care of the public trustee. Kinsman wants the province to implement an automatic review of each case to make sure people under guardianship should really be there. You can hear more on this story coming up in this next half hour right here on Information Radio. 1 in 3 First Nations infants in Manitoba had an open file with CFS before they turned 1. That is according to a new study by the University of Manitoba and 2 First Nations groups. It looked at data from 47,000 First Nations infants born in Manitoba between 1998 and 2013. 1 in 20 became permanent wards of the state by the age of 5. Families Minister Nahani Fontaine says work is underway to, quote, decolonize the system.
Child welfare in the next 10 years is going to look significantly different in Manitoba and certainly across the country as more and more First Nations assume jurisdiction. Child welfare will and is changing as we speak.
The study's lead author says Indigenous-led change is urgently needed. You can read more on all these stories on our website this morning. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
All right. Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Well, we have a sunny start to today. It's quite calm out there. Abby's in with our regional forecast now from CBC.
13 degrees in Winnipeg throughout the morning. Expect plenty of sunshine, giving way to a mix of sun and cloud by the noon period. Now, there's a chance of showers and thunderstorm later in the day, and we will see our temperatures climbing to around 20 degrees with breezy northwest winds. Heading west to Brandon, it's currently 12 degrees under partly cloudy skies. For today, you should be anticipating a mix of sun and clouds with a chance of showers in the afternoon and also a risk of thunderstorm. The winds will pick up later, and you'll be seeing a light breeze. You see a high of 19. Thompson is at 5 degrees with light rain showers at the moment. For today, expect a mix of sun and clouds with a 30% chance of showers later in the morning. Temperatures will reach a high of 17. Churchill is at 5 degrees with partly cloudy skies. Today's forecast includes a mix of sun and clouds and a 60% chance of rain this morning, possibly mixed with freezing rain, and the winds will come from the north, occasionally gusting, and we'll see a high of +3. Down in Dauphin, it's currently 13 and cloudy. You should be expecting a mix of sun and clouds later in the day, a chance of showers and a risk of thunderstorm in the afternoon. Temperatures will peak near 20 degrees with northwest winds easing off later in the day. Gimli, good morning. You are at 13 with light showers. Today for the Interlake region, we will see a mix of sun and clouds and a chance of showers and a risk of thunderstorm. Temperatures will reach around 20 during the day. And for Steinbach, where it's at 13 degrees and sunny at the moment, throughout today, expect sunny conditions. Then there's going to be a transition to a mix of sun and clouds later in the day and a chance of showers and a risk of thunderstorm also. Temperatures reaching 21. And finally, in Morris, it's 13, clear and sunny at the moment. For the forecast for the Pembina Valley region, it includes sunny conditions in the morning, then turning to a mix of sun and clouds, and there's a chance of showers in the afternoon with a risk of thunderstorm, and winds will be light from the northwest. Temperatures peaking at 21. Right now in Winnipeg, it is 13, and we're heading to a high of 20.
Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Abby Adeyemi with our forecast today. Corey Funk is directing the show, but also covering what's going on in the commute.
Yes, only good news so far today on the commuter line. Got a call from a jubilant Mike who says on Marion turning into onto Goulet there, it's now all clear. It was down to one lane for a good while there, and now it's smooth sailing. So that's good news for the folks heading down Marion this morning. Other than that, things seem to be going fairly smoothly. But if it's not, or if you want to complain about some kind of construction, that's why I'm here. 204-788-3093.
What's it like picking up that line? Like, do people ever like full on just like swear and lose it because they're stuck and they're done and they're frustrated?
I'm surprised people hold it together pretty well overall. Actually, they're pretty polite. But I've definitely had to vet a couple swear words for sure.
I bet. All right, it's 21 minutes to 8 o'clock here on CBC. And next on the show, Karen Gallagher says there's always time to help out your community. But it's not entirely clear how she balances it all. The mother of three works in HR with the University College of the North. She's also a volunteer firefighter in her hometown of The Paw. And she volunteers with the local handy van service there. And as if that weren't enough, she also helps to connect people with medical services that are not easily available in the Paw. Now, those are just some of the reasons that Karen was named one of CBC Manitoba's top 10 Future 40 Under 40 finalists this week. I spoke with her yesterday via Zoom.
Good morning.
Congratulations. How do you feel about being named one of our Future 40 finalists?
It still feels very unreal to me. I mean, in my opinion, I'm just a girl from the North that helps out when I can. And it was very surprising to be recognized for something like this, but it was great. Thank you very much.
How far back do your roots go in the North, in the Paw specifically?
I was born and raised in the Paw, Manitoba, moved around a lot as a kid. And then once I hit my early 20s and started evaluating what my priorities were and where I wanted to lay my roots and raise my family, there was no option other than Northern Manitoba.
I read how you got into volunteer firefighting there, and you were very specific about if you're going to volunteer to do this, what you're going to do. Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so growing up, I always had a good feel for hands-on type careers. So I tried to get involved in things like landscaping, trucking. I applied with the railroad a couple of times as a conductor. And a lot of times people tried to shove me kind of into that girl box, I like to say. So they'd often hire me in a hands-on position and then slowly filter me towards the office, answering phones, things like that. And that just really wasn't my goals with my career and what I wanted to do with my life. So when I joined the fire department and they asked me, is there anything that you don't want to do? Are you scared of heights? Are you scared of water? I said, don't put me in the girl box. I have no problem cleaning up after myself, taking care of my space, respecting and honoring it. But if you have me back at the firehouse during a fire call and I'm making chili and doing laundry, I mean, that's a very important job for sure, but that's not the job I'm here for.
I love that terminology. Don't put me in the girl box. I'm going to steal that, actually. You should put that on a shirt.
I should. It's a good idea.
Yeah, you should. Let's talk about some of the work you do with the Paw Health Complex Foundation. You're vice president there. How does that group work with the community? What can you tell me more about it?
So the Paw Health Complex Foundation Board of Directors is a group of local volunteers. We participate in the Board of Directors purely as volunteers. We don't take an honorarium or anything like that. And our fundraising efforts are focused in the Paw, Manitoba. So in Manitoba, we do have health regions, and a lot of times some of those funds get filtered to different communities, different places, and we have to share a lot. So our foundation works to raise money in the Paw from the Paw citizens, and we keep the money here. So something we've recently done is we raised some extra funds to have a blanket warmer in our dialysis unit so that people going through those treatments would be more comfortable. Because if anybody knows someone who's gone through dialysis or if they've gone through it themselves, it's not a comfortable procedure. And you lose a lot of your body heat in the process. So it's very important to keep people comfortable as much as possible in those types of situations.
What's interesting about the work you're doing, and you mentioned that you alluded to the in the North, they're huge regions. So sometimes I understand that it'll be like, well, you could share with this other region, but it's like super far away. Is that part of why that local push to get things for people right in the Paw is important?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So to refer back to those blankets I had just mentioned, when we started our dialysis unit here, or as it's ongoing, they had told us that we could borrow blankets from Flin Flon, which is 150 kilometers away from us. So the chances of that blanket being warm by the time it got to our hospital, pretty unlikely.
Let's talk about the handyman service that I mentioned. So that's in the Paw. Also, you volunteer with that. But I also understand that you might have been voluntold to get involved because this sort of runs a little bit in your family, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. So growing up, my family has been involved with the handy van for a number of years. My grandmother does a lot of the administrative duties. My mom was a dispatcher for a number of years, and I've always been close family friends with the drivers of the van. And as I got older, my grandma would ask me for help with our radio pledge show. So we go on the radio for a couple of days in the year, and we ask local people to contribute towards our fundraising efforts. And that's where a lot of our funds do come from, is from those donations purely from local individuals.
What's the answer to the question I posed at the beginning about your time? Because you also volunteer with 4-H Helping Hands, the PAW Guest List, the local health involvement group, and you have, your job and 3 kids. How are you squeezing it all in?
So over the past few years, I've had to learn to manage my priorities a little bit better, because there was a time when I was getting involved in too many things and it got to be a bit too much for me. So now a lot of those extra organizations, I volunteer on a very part-time basis. So if they need extra hands with a community cleanup initiative, or if they need extra hands for some fundraising that they're doing, then I will jump in and play an extra part in that. It's very important to me to show children and young people that getting out in your community and lending a hand makes you feel great as a person. It makes your community a better place. A lot of times there's those residual side effects. When you're out there helping people, those people are maybe a little less stressed out, a little less anxious, things like that. So it makes the community as a whole a better place to be when you're out there playing your part.
I understand you even use the word that contagious when you talk about once you start sort of giving and volunteering and finding whatever time you've got to give and balancing that you describe it as contagious.
Yeah, so a lot of people, when I ask if they can volunteer with some of the things that I'm involved with, they often tell me, I just don't have the time. And to me, nobody really has the time. Time is one of the few finite things that we have in this world, and you either make the time or you don't. So absolutely nothing against other people with other priorities. We all have the things that are very important to us. So whether you're involved in the health side of your community or the education side of your community, or whichever capacity you are passionate about, if you get out and you put yourself forward for that kind of thing, it doesn't feel like you're spending time. It feels like you're using it in a great way. You may not get paid for your efforts, but you do see that contagiousness. You see other people being influenced by the work that you're doing. You see that their spirits are brought up higher. They're a lot more comfortable in their own space, their own community, when you get out there and do your little part to help.
Well, you are clearly a motivator, a mentor, and a leader in Manitoba. Congratulations on being now named one of CBC Manitoba's Future 40 finalists. And thank you for the work you do.
Thank you.
Karen Gallagher via Zoom. We reached her in the PAW. She's a volunteer extraordinaire, as you heard, including with the PAW Fire Department. She was named one of CBC Manitoba's Future 40 Under 40 this week. Read about all the other finalists on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. Now, we cannot resist going back to what she said at the start of that conversation. Don't put me in the girl box. We've got perfect music to follow up the interview. This is Kelly Batto and her latest song. It's a tribute to women everywhere and in all fields who are leading the way. And it also features fellow Winnipegger Alpha Toshineza. This is Femboss.
On t'a négligé toutes ces années. Société aux tendances démodées. Pourtant tu es le centre de gravité. Dès l'aube tu te réveilles. Tel un soldat. Et rien ne t'arrête. Tu te mets au pas. Tu te lances dans la vie comme la flèche de l'arc. Jamais ne dévie, ne se désiste. Tu es femme de fer. Femme boss, rien n'est plus femme boss. Femme boss, c'est ce que tu as pour fort. Femme boss, femme boss. Femme boss, c'est toujours le boss. Femme boss, c'est ce que tu as femme boss. Femme boss, c'est toi la femme boss.
Toujours au top, toujours au poste, déterminé jusqu'au bout. Ne laisse personne te mettre la corde au cou. Tu respires l'excellence, je m'incline et te donne mon tout. Femme boss, aisance, élégance, tocos, laisse parler les molosses. Mais dans ce jeu y a pas de cadeau, prends ta part du gâteau. Et s'ils veulent jouer de toi c'est trop gâté. Oh, oh, oh.
Femme boss, femme boss, femme boss, tu es trop fort. Femme boss, femme boss, femme boss, toujours au poste. Femme boss, femme boss, femme boss, toujours au top. Au top, t'es toujours au top. Au top, t'es toujours femme boss. Au top, t'es toujours au top. Demande sur demande, dis-moi qui prend soin de toi. Qui prend soin de toi. Tu donnes et tu donnes, tu m'étonnes encore et encore. Dis-moi, matrone, dans les gratte-ciels, tout comme au champ. Tu es la matrone, y'en a pas de comme peut contrecarrer ce que tu as planifié. C'est toi à la fin, me boss.
Laisse parler les molosses.
Calibado featuring Alpha Toshineza and Femboss on CBC. 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app or on YouTube. It's 11 minutes to 8 o'clock.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
This is your heart. This is your heart after discovering a new CBC podcast. These are your feet. These are your feet after finding a CBC music playlist. This is your brain. This is your brain after hearing your favorite CBC radio show. Fall in love at first listen with the CBC Listen app. Stream CBC audio anytime, anywhere, all for free. Download CBC Listen today.
It is 9 minutes to 8 o'clock and some sunshine out there this morning in Winnipeg. It is 13 degrees in the city. And go to our website to learn more about what happened with the tornadoes in Manitoba yesterday. 4, maybe 5 is what Environment Canada has confirmed this morning. So we're still working to get some more information. Well, speaking of what you might have heard in the news, next on the show, taking away a person's rights is supposed to be a last resort. But a CBC Manitoba News investigation found that several people placed under the public guardian and trustee of Manitoba felt trapped in a system they could not escape. A doctor deemed them incapable, and now they're fighting to get out. The CBCI team's Caroline Bargut is in studio live to talk more about it. Hi.
Hi, good morning.
So just so people understand, let's remind them, what is the Public Guardian and Trustee of Manitoba?
Well, the Public Guardian and Trustee of Manitoba is an arm's length agency of the government. And it basically makes financial decisions for people who were deemed mentally incompetent and unable to make their own decisions. Now, a doctor has to deem you mentally incompetent, obviously. For example, if someone has dementia, they don't have any family, or no one volunteers to help them with their things, they could end up under the Public Guardian and Trustee. You don't have any control over your finances. You don't get to, access your bank account when you want. You don't pay your own bills. You don't make your own health decisions. You also don't even get mail delivered to your house. Experts in the field call it a form of civil death. And that's because once you're in the system, you're basically in the system, and it's really difficult to get out, and you lose your rights. So you're assigned an administrator who will now make these decisions for you.
So what does this look like in reality?
So we spoke to many people who were under the Public Guardian. George Kinsman is one of them. Back in September 2022, he fell in his apartment, and he was there for about 3 days. That landed him in hospital, where he was for about 2 months. When he got out, he learned that virtually he had no rights. That's because a doctor treating him deemed him mentally incapable of looking after himself.
I went to withdraw $30, right, one day, and they told me your bank account is frozen. And then the next stage I found out about, all my mail was redirected to them. So to this day, I still receive no mail after a year and a half. I feel like I'm stuck in a can, and I can't get out. I have no money. I got nothing.
Kinsman says when he was in the hospital, health officials told him that they'd get him some help, if he just signed some papers. So he signed them. He didn't know what kind of help he'd be getting. He didn't realize that he would be losing all of his rights. There are over 2,700 people who are under guardianship because a doctor deemed them incapable of looking after themselves.
Tell us more about how someone actually gets placed under the public trustee.
Well, the way it's supposed to work is a doctor or health professional will examine you and decide that you are mentally incapable of looking after yourself. They fill out a form, which is called a Form 21, and then they send that form to Manitoba's chief psychiatrist, who then decides whether to accept the doctor's recommendations or whether to reject them. The person who is the subject of this examination gets 7 days. They get sent a letter and then given 7 days to respond to that letter to say whether they plan to object. Now, we spoke to several people, including George George Kinsman, who had no idea that they were being placed under guardianship. Boyd Noble also experienced a medical condition that landed him in hospital in the summer of 2022. Now, looking back now, he thinks that he had long COVID and that he was completely out of it for a couple of weeks. But then he regained his senses and he became, as he says, completely normal. By then, the trustee had sold his car, most of his valuables. They put his house up for sale. And, he didn't even get an allowance. So he had not even a penny to his name.
They took all my my money. They closed all my bank accounts. Didn't give me any heads up what I had to do. If it wasn't for my friends and their generosity and probably wealth, that I wouldn't have survived.
He credits those same friends for getting him out of guardianship. One of those friends is a doctor, the other one is a lawyer, and they figured out how to navigate the system.
I had a friend that said, you just got to start over. You got to forget what you've lost, and you can't lament what you've lost. I think there's something wrong with the public trustee system.
He believes that there should be more oversight and an easier way for people to get out.
All right, how do people get out?
Well, it isn't easy. They have to get a doctor to reassess them and then fill out a form. And then that form then gets sent to the chief psychiatrist. Now, Dr. Jim Sim is the chief psychiatrist. He says that he tries to balance people's constitutional rights while also trying to protect the most vulnerable.
I would review it and ask if any other information is required before I make a decision, because sometimes the intervention of the public trustee has allowed someone to regain stability, and there's always a bit of concern, okay, if this allowed their rent to be paid, allowed for them to be housed, allowed for them to have their regular medications that are required, that the funding goes there, and I'm taking that away from them, I got to be pretty darn sure that they're able to care for themselves.
But Lisa Engel says it isn't that easy. It's not as easy as it sounds to get out. She's an associate professor at the University of Manitoba in the Department of Occupational Therapy.
It's not as much as they're falling through the cracks as when they get sucked into this system. There is not a good avenue and an easy avenue for them to get reassessed and out of it. It can be really confusing and people aren't always explaining it well.
So what can be done about it?
Well, Engel says that there should be an automatic mechanism for review. Every province has a type of guardianship, but some of the systems are different. For example, in British Columbia, a person must be reassessed if they request it. We don't have the same rules here. Lorne Kiss supports that. Now, he's 58 years old. He was under guardianship for more than 2.5 years after someone at Siloam Mission decided that, they had concerns about his gambling, and he had also threatened suicide. 5 months after he was put under guardianship, a doctor deemed him very capable. He went to see the psychiatrist, and they wrote a letter to the chief psychiatrist basically saying, this guy only has a gambling problem. He's okay. Despite that, it took more than a year for him to get out.
If someone told me this story, I would not believe them. I would say, you're crazy. There's no way that could happen to a human being. Not in Canada, anyway.
Well, he says that it was actually 2 years. It took him more than 2 years to get out, even though 5 months in, a doctor deemed him capable. He believes anyone placed under guardianship should be given a lawyer and go to court and be able to decide whether or not they are capable.
Well, what's the province saying about this?
Well, not much, because there is a blackout because of the by-election, so the government can't make any promises, but they did say this. We take the care of Manitobans very seriously. The public guardian trustee is only appointed as a last resort, and we recognize our responsibility for the safety of some of Manitoba's most vulnerable and improving legislation to make this possible.
Caroline, thank you.
Thanks.
Caroline Bargut with our I-Team in CBC Manitoba. With headlines, here's Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, assessing the damage in the light of day, a tornado touched down near Swan Lake First Nation last evening. It was one of 4 or 5 tornadoes in southwest Manitoba. Swan Lake's chief says there was some damage to the powwow grounds, and the roof of an elder's home was also damaged. And family gathered for a vigil last night to remember the father who died after being stabbed near his son's elementary school in downtown Winnipeg. 49-year-old Ricky Manchese died on Tuesday. We'll hear more in our next local news at 8:30.
And after 8, a grade 10 teacher who says he's seeing the impact of energy drinks on his students in the classroom every day. What does that look like, and what does he want done about it? We'll find out. Sunny on your Thursday morning, 13, a high of 20. Could see some late day showers. And the commute's going fine.
Today on Q.
Hey, I'm Talia Schlanger sitting in for Tom Power. In her debut feature film, Ali Panku wanted to capture the nuance of comedy, how joy and despair can exist at the same time. Her new movie follows a stand-up comedian who's struggling with PTSD.
I showered today.
Oh my God.
I did.
Yeah. Q, this morning at 10:30 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app, or wherever you get your podcasts. The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current.
I'm Duncan McHugh. Lunch hour used to be co-worker social hour for many Canadians, a time to relax, eat, and chat with colleagues. Now, fewer workers are going out for a midday meal, and it's affecting businesses and culture too. Coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Canada is sending more weapons to Ukraine. National Defense Minister Bill Blair made the announcement this morning in Brussels. He is there at a meeting of the 56 countries providing military support to Ukraine.
Canada will provide Ukraine with 2,300 Canadian Rocket Vehicle 7s, or CRV rocket motors. I'm also announcing today that Canada will send an additional number of rounds of small arms ammunition, as well as 29 NANOC remote systems. The NANOC is a remotely controlled weapon station used by the Canadian Army on our own light armored vehicles, and the NANOC system can be mounted on various armored vehicles in Ukraine.
He also says Canada will begin shipping the first of 50 armored vehicles pledged to Ukraine this week. At the G7 summit in Italy, plans are being made to take frozen Russian assets and give that money to Ukraine for its defense. A government official says Canada could contribute $5 billion through this framework. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is a guest at this G7 summit. He is scheduled to speak with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau later today. Rafi Boudjikanian is in Italy with more on the talks.
Prime Minister Justin Trudeau landing in Grottaglie, Italy. One of his first meetings during the G7 starting today is with Chancellor Olaf Scholz of Germany. And Trudeau will also sit down with French President Emmanuel Macron during a packed day that involves a working session on Africa and development for all the leaders.
It's put a little bit of pressure on Canada to really up its game.
Edward Akufo teaches political science at the University of Fraser Valley in British Columbia. He points out it's been 2 years since Ottawa has said it would come up with a strategy for the world's fastest growing continent, one that's now still being hashed out by parliamentary committees.
We seriously risk being irrelevant on the African continent.
But two conflicts that have captured global attention could well overshadow the Africa session. The leaders are expected to tackle the fighting between Israel and Hamas in the Middle East, as well as Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
There's a desperation for how to get Ukraine money.
Max Bergman is with the U.S.-based Center for Strategic and International Studies. He says Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky badly needs the cash for weapons to repel Moscow.
Ukrainians are clearly on the back foot, trying to hold ground.
A Canadian government official says the G7 will be working on a proposal to use frozen Russian assets to provide Ukraine with that support. And Trudeau is also expected to meet Zelensky. Rafi Boudjikanian on CBC News, Bari, Italy.
The United Nations Refugee Agency says a record number of people were forcibly displaced in the past year. A new report out this morning says conflicts in Sudan, the Middle East, and Myanmar are the root cause. It is calling for urgent action. Sylvia Saya works with the agency in Democratic Republic of Congo.
C'est beaucoup plus la population qui subit les astres de conflit.
She says the impact of the conflict is heavily felt by civilians. Families are separated, children cannot go to school, and food is more complicated to find. This is the 12th consecutive year the UN has reported a rise in the number of forcibly displaced people. It has nearly tripled since 2012. Coroners across Canada have historically not tracked the deaths of people experiencing homelessness. But as Carissa Donkin reports, a new national process could change that.
I just wanted them to realize that these faces, these names, they mattered. They were someone's mother, father, son, and daughters.
Sabrina Robichaud rides her bike to a mural in downtown Moncton, New Brunswick every day. She says she made it to remember people who've died on the streets, many of whom were her friends. She doesn't have a home herself, but Robichaud still finds a way to record the names and track down photos from when they were alive.
I wish half of them knew how much they were loved and cared and how much they meant to people. Because a lot of us, we don't think we matter to a lot of people.
New Brunswick doesn't track how many people die while homeless. Outside of British Columbia and Toronto, most Canadian jurisdictions don't. But the Public Health Agency of Canada and Statistics Canada want that to change. They designed a method to track residence types when someone dies and shared it with coroners and medical examiners across the country. Information collected as part of the project could begin flowing to the federal government as early as this summer. It's welcome news to Naomi Nichols, a Trent University professor who's been working to track this information in Peterborough, Ontario.
And right now it feels like we're racing against the clock. People aren't making it through, winter after winter. We're losing people.
She says the information could help inform government responses to drug and housing crises across Canada. Carissa Donkin, CBC News, Fredericton.
A truck drives slowly through a flooded street in Lauderhill, Florida. The southeastern part of the state has seen record rainfall and flooding. Sections of main highways are closed. A part of Fort Lauderdale's airport is flooded. Many flights expected to arrive today are canceled or delayed. Much of the region is still under a flood warning. More rain is expected today, tomorrow, and through the weekend. Tesla shareholders have a multi-billion-dollar decision to make today. They are voting whether or not to reinstate a record-breaking pay package for the company's CEO. Elon Musk could make $56 billion US. Freelance reporter Tony Waterman has more from Austin, Texas, Tesla's headquarters.
We're handing over production Cybertrucks to their actual owners.
For the past 6 years, Elon Musk hasn't received a single paycheck from Tesla. Instead, he's been waiting on stock options worth more than 70 billion Canadian dollars after meeting difficult targets laid out by the Tesla board, including growing the company more than tenfold. The deal was approved by shareholders in 2018, but nullified by a judge in January, who said Tesla's board at the time was stacked in Musk's favor. On Thursday, shareholders will vote again. Carl Brewer is an automotive industry analyst.
As crazy as the pay seems, you can't really point to another individual who has accomplished what Elon accomplished.
But that was in the past. Amid fierce competition, Tesla's sales have been slumping. Its stock is down about 30% this year, and it's laid off more than 6,000 workers. Major shareholders, including one of the world's largest sovereign wealth funds, say they're voting against it. In a video posted on a Tesla website, board chair Robin Denholm said the pay structure, which requires Musk to hold shares for at least 5 years, will keep him motivated.
Which means Elon is incentivized to drive the same growth that we've seen over the past 5 years for many years to come.
The question is whether he'd stay if shareholders vote no. Tony Waterman for CBC News, Austin, Texas.
Celine Dion may be Canada's best-known singer, but she can no longer do the thing that she loves most. The international superstar has a disease that is slowly eroding her voice. And she spoke to CBC's chief correspondent, Adrian Arsenault, in Las Vegas.
There were nights when the wind was so cold.
Should you wonder why Celine Dion is now opening up after being quiet for so long about the illness that for nearly 2 decades has been eating away at her voice? Well, she says it comes down to being tired of the lies.
And lying for so many years. I have a tonsillitis, a sinus infection. But that was far from that. I couldn't live with the lie.
She lied when she canceled concerts, lied about why her voice was croaking or behaving oddly, because she didn't know for all that time that she had a rare and punishing illness.
There were days when the sun was so cruel.
Stiff person syndrome can cause muscular spasms so harsh it can break bones. And when we sat down recently to talk in Las Vegas, she said this has happened to her and it's agonizing.
When you get in spasms so much, well, you don't remember everything. It can last a moment, it can last a few hours. It's not just like a spasm in the calf in the middle of the night. It's pretty painful.
A global superstar, yes, but also a mom. She has 3 sons. Her twins are 13. And what we're learning now is that they are being taught how to help Celine. Panic buttons in her home, drills to get medical intervention when the spasms hit. What she's going through is a lot to take in for her, for them, for her fans. But this is where she starts opening up. She wants to, and she needs to. Adrienne Arsenault, CBC News, Las Vegas.
You can now stream that exclusive English-Canadian interview on CBC Gem and on the National's YouTube page, and watch it tonight on the National. Celine Dion, I Will Sing Again, is a 1-hour primetime special airing Friday at 8 p.m. on CBC Television. That is World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Well, good morning, Manitoba, and hello, Winnipeg. We made it to Thursday. It is June 13th after a night of really, really crazy weather. Heather's in a moment with our full headlines, and we'll talk more about the weather. But today, the weather for you looks pretty nice. There's sun streaming into our downtown studio, and we'll check in with the forecast in a moment. You are listening on CBC 89.3 FM, 990 AM on the app, or watching that sunshine stream on YouTube. Well, this half hour on the program, a grade 10 teacher says he's seeing the impact of energy drinks on students in his classroom every day. Coming up, we're going to find out what that looks like and what he wants done about it. He has some concerns. Health Canada, by the way, recommends maximum caffeine intake for children up to age 18 is 2.5 milligrams. The limit under Canadian law, 180 milligram limit overall in a product. And a lot of these drinks overshoot that. So stay tuned. We'll hear more from this teacher. In the context of some of the issues that have been going on across the country with trying to regulate the amounts of caffeine. So that's coming up. Right now, though, let's go to Heather Wells in our news department with headlines. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, the chief of Swan Lake First Nation is grateful no one was hurt when a tornado touched down in his community last night. Chief Jason Daniels says the powwow arbor was ripped apart and the aluminum roof on an elder's home was lifted up at the corners. It was one of what Environment and Climate Change Canada says were 4 or 5 twisters to touch down in western and southwest Manitoba last night. We'll hear more from the chief and also from a meteorologist coming up. And taking away a person's rights is supposed to be a last resort in this province when someone isn't able to care for themselves. But a CBC News investigation spoke to several people who say they were placed under the care of the public guardian and trustee of Manitoba when they shouldn't have been. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right. Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Abby Adiyemi, what do we know about the weather situation today?
On this Junior Friday, it is 15 in the city. As the morning progresses, we'll see plenty of sunshine and a transition into a mix of sun and clouds by the afternoon period. We have a chance of showers later, also risk of thunderstorm later in the day. We saw some fog patches early in the morning. I saw some on my way in, but they are dissipating by now. We're expecting a high around 20 with light winds from the northwest. Now, tonight we can expect partly cloudy skies, a chance of showers in the evening period, and also a risk of thunderstorm. It will clear up later this evening, and then things will be calm as we get into the night, into Friday, and that will be calm. Looking into tomorrow, Friday will start sunny, then turn into a mix of sun and clouds, and we'll see temperatures actually tomorrow get into 25, making it a pleasant day. But for Winnipeg, it is 14. Thompson and Churchill both hovering around 5 and 6. We'll be seeing 17 for Thompson and high of 10 for Churchill. Brandon all the way down to Morris. Guess what? They're hovering around 14 and 15s at the moment. But Winnipeg right now 15, and we're heading to a high of 20.
Thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Well, let's get into traffic here. In the situation this morning, it's been pretty calm so far on your commute, but we are hearing now that Marion to Goulet is slow going right now. So if you have any information about any spots in the city that we should be passing along or out in the highways as well, let us know what you're seeing and how your commute is. 788-3093. Well, as I mentioned, a Winnipeg teacher is raising the alarm on a new solution to an ages-old problem: tired kids in the classroom. Previously, students relied on a cup of coffee or maybe a can of cola to give them the caffeine pick-me-up that they needed to get through the day. Today, though, the preferred choice is energy drinks, and some of which have several times the amount of caffeine in them. For example, according to a recent CBC report, a can of Monster Energy contains about 160 milligrams of caffeine. That is triple the amount in a can of Coke. And Monster was 160. Prime, for example, another product, 200 milligrams. And an extra strength shot, you see those little things, of 5-hour energy, 230 milligrams. And so those are all obviously well beyond what a can of cola would have. These energy drinks are a concern for my next guest. David Law is a grade 10 teacher at Seven Oaks Met School, and he joins us now to talk about how he says that they're impacting the health and the performance of his students. Good morning.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
So for those of us that aren't teachers and aren't in classrooms, and you teach grade 10, as we mentioned, how common is it to see students drinking energy drinks?
Oh, yeah, they become all too common with the kids that I teach. And this is going back to when I taught middle years, about 6 years ago now, and I teach grade 10 now, and it's common with every grade in my school. And it's hard on teachers, it's hard on kids. And I have a lot of sympathy for them. This is just another thing that teenagers nowadays have to deal with on top of everything that they already have to endure. But it's a huge issue.
So tell me a little bit about, you see them, kids drinking these every day. Is that fair?
For sure. Yeah. Every single day.
Yeah. And what's your concern as a teacher? What do you notice about how it impacts behavior?
Well, they're jittery and they're unfocused. And I mean, it's part and parcel of the cycle that teenagers are in these days, where they stay up super late on their devices, and really late. The majority of my kids, I think a lot of people will be shocked to find out, are going to bed, 2, 3 in the morning. And I mean, every single night on a weeknight. And then they get up early for school, and then they drink these energy drinks to, make it through the day. And then, God forbid, they actually want to go to bed at a decent time because now they're over-caffeinated and they can't sleep. And so then the cycle just continues.
How do you deal with students who are in that cycle, tired and I guess basically strung out on the caffeine at the same time?
Well, as teachers, we're used to just doing our best, I think. But I think I got maybe a bit fed up the other day when I was sitting with one of my grade 10s and working along him, and he was drinking an energy drink. And so I think I was on my last nerve. I gave the whole class a lecture about it and how damaging these are. And, to their credit, there was zero pushback. These kids know how terrible it is for them. But they're just a lot of them are just unable to make those healthy choices themselves, I think. And they, we're not even talking about sugar content and artificial flavors, right? We're just talking about the caffeine. But some of these kids are drinking 2, 3, 4 a day. And they're obviously pretty serious, short-term effects, but also I'm really genuinely worried about the long-term effects as well.
How is it different compared to when students would have just been sort of, drinking coffee or maybe having a soft drink to get a little shot of caffeine? What have you noticed? At what point did you realize this is problematic?
Well, I mean, it's been problematic for years. But I found an uptick recently for some reason. Maybe they're just more available, or maybe their price has gone down, or maybe they're just more in fashion. These, like you said in your intro, these drinks have, some of them, like this one I was looking at, it was 180 milligrams. So that's more than 4 cups of coffee in a single can. And, if they're drinking 2 or 3 of these cans a day, they're really jacked, they're really jittery, and not able to concentrate. And they're already sleep deprived, right? So their brains are not really functioning properly. And so you're getting these kids who are awake but not really present.
Well, I was citing the numbers there when I was talking about the amounts of caffeine from a CBC report that we had now done across the country last fall, because at that time more than 24 energy drink brands were deemed potentially unsafe because of their high caffeine content, and that was according to recalls that were issued from the Canadian Food Inspection Agency. But there are groups across the country right now that are pushing for other changes to happen because they have some of the same concerns that you've been outlining this morning. What do you think some of the solutions might be from your perspective?
Well, here's the thing. This isn't the most serious or pressing issue facing the younger generation now, right? There's like drugs and alcohol and online things, and it's all those are super serious. And so the problem of energy drinks, I think, has kind of fallen, off people's shelf. It isn't a huge priority, and I get it, but the thing is, I think there's also a pretty simple solution here, which is just regulation, right? Like minors have no business purchasing these products. Like right now, a 13-year-old can walk into a convenience store and buy, 3 or 4 of these drinks, just binge drink on them all day. And by the way, I say this all without any judgment. I was a teenager once, and if energy drinks were available to me back when I was in school, I probably would have bought them. Like I was, a thrill-seeking kid, undiagnosed ADHD, and this is exactly the kind of kid who is particularly susceptible to these kind of products. And these are probably also the kids who are struggling in school academically, and binging caffeine isn't really helping them be successful.
So just last, David, I wonder, you can do two things. You can ban at the source selling the drinks to the kids, but there can also be restrictions and changes within schools. So is that something that you'd like to see, that the drinks wouldn't be allowed in schools?
I mean, that would be nice. I also, I knew this interview was coming up too, and I, wanted to be a good role model. And so I followed up my own advice, and I sent an email to my parents about my concerns around these beverages. And the response was super positive. Like, parents do want to know if their kids are engaging in risky behavior, and they want to know if they're making healthy choices. And, sometimes teachers are the only way parents can know what's going on at school. And so I think, banning drinks at a school level, that's one step. But I think in the meantime, teachers also have to be involved, and parents want to know that their kids are spending their allowances on these drinks, right?
Can you ban them in your classroom in the meantime? Can you say, fine, but in the meantime, nothing in, Mr. Law's classroom?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, absolutely.
Is that something you're going to do?
It's something we've already done.
Okay.
After my rant, I don't want to see these anywhere. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much for outlining what, as you said, is an issue. And I'm sure in many classrooms and obviously in many provinces across the country right now. Nice to have you on CBC. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
David Law with us live this morning, grade 10 teacher over at Seven Oaks Met School. If you want to weigh in on energy drinks, you can always call us, 788-3205. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to hear more about this. We have a dietitian that's going to join us who is also raising the alarm bell over kids and these drinks.
On the topics that matter, your voice should be heard.
I'm really concerned.
And I'm not really happy about that.
Radio Noon is where you can voice your take. I'm Janet Stewart. From 12:30 to 1 p.m., Radio Noon opens the phone lines on one important topic.
It just brings everyone together.
Radio Noon's call-in segment, 204-780-0893. We want to hear from you, weekdays on CBC.
So today's question on the call-in is the changing workplace. How has the ability for some people to work from home impacted you? Maybe you're the one at home, maybe you're the one at work. But how has that impacted you? What's it changed? So how's the ability to work from home impacted you? And how has it changed your workplace? That is on Radio Noon's call-in today. You can leave a message right now if you can't make it live, 788-3797, 788-3797, if you want to leave a message for the call-in conversation. Right now in Winnipeg at 8:23 on your Thursday morning. Abby always calls this Junior Friday. I love that. It's Junior Friday. It is 15 degrees and we got lots of sun downtown. That's going to stay with us for most of the morning. And then late this afternoon, we do have a 30% chance of showers and a risk of a thunderstorm even with that. Our high in Winnipeg is going to be 20. Looking overnight to risk of a thunderstorm staying with us. And then tomorrow, sunshine and a pretty warm day tomorrow. We're going to have a high of 25 degrees tomorrow in Winnipeg. But for today, we're just aiming for 20. Well, many of us have learned to drive, and some of us have also maybe had the dubious pleasure of teaching another person to drive. But our parents cut out to be the best instructors for their children. Recently, one of you called us with your story from here in Manitoba, where I just love this story. You were sharing that your parents were trying to teach you to drive together in the vehicle, and they were bickering so much that you just gave up and didn't get your license for a long while. I love that story. But it's not just here in Manitoba where this is being talked about. CBC producer Janina Whitfield found out for herself.
It's the end of the school day, and all the cars are lining up outside my daughter's high school. My 15-year-old wants to get behind the wheel like she always does these days to practice driving.
Yes, put it in drive.
I believe it's in drive.
Entering.
Is it in drive? It's all the way down.
Shouldn't you know if it's in drive?
I don't know if it's in drive. Is it in drive?
Yes, that's a D. You see the D on your... Teaching kids to drive is one of those harrowing moments, just like sleep and potty training for toddlers. TV shows and movie shows get that.
Okay, merge. 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 Merge, 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 merge.
Watch the road, watch the road!
You're right. Stop. Then I look in my mirror. Okay. Then I glance at my blind spot.
Glance with your head, not the whole car. I swear to God, woman.
I'm not trying to hear that.
Hey, Celia. Yeah, I can't really talk right now, but...
Put the phone down.
What?
Put the mobile device down now. Oh, but... Hey, eyes on the road!
So it's clear I'm not the only driving instructor who struggled teaching my own child. I hit up my daughter's high school after school to find out how kids cope with their parents being their instructors.
Hello, my name is Marco Solis. I'm in grade 11, and I took driver training. It was very exciting, actually. Most of the stuff was pretty boring, but when we actually got on the road, it was quite exciting. My parents tried to teach me how to drive, but they were kind of iffy. Well, they're helicopter parents. They're very safety. So even when I took a little bit off, when I turned a bit too much, they were flying over the car like crazy. And I was calm, I was reasonable, I was trying to turn my way back. But one of my parents, my dad, is very impatient. So my mom was a bit more calmer, but I would definitely not go driving my dad again.
Marcos told me driving should be in the hands of a professional. So I turned to driving instructor Ron Bedeke for tips on what I should be doing.
One of the most important things that I want parents to know when they're teaching their kids is that their kids are scared, okay? And so are you. But you got to get through it. You've got to try and give your kids confidence and just work through it.
The end result, he says, is worth it.
I had a student just before you came up, and what I do with my students is they call me Ron, and they call Judy Judy. They don't say Mr. Budeke or Mrs. Budeke. They call us by our first names. And she came running up to me today and said, Ron, I got my license. That's just great. I got it when I was 16 on the first try. And that just makes your soul happy.
So I'm working on being a better, calmer driving instructor every day for my daughter so that she can someday get her license too. Because I want my soul and my arteries to be happy. For CBC Radio, I'm Janine Whitfield.
Man, I love the audio in that. That was awesome. If you want to call us to let us know about your experience trying to teach a loved one to drive or try to teach anyone to drive, but I just love the family interaction and dynamics, please call us. We'll get your calls on the air tomorrow. It'll be a bit of a Friday storytelling, but 788-3205. Abby, you're gonna out your brother?
That was me in that car. Like, stop. Like, you know, I'm the chillest person. I'm very patient. I explained everything to him. He started off, and then it looked like everything I said did not happen. and at an intersection, he was just supposed to make a left turn. He didn't turn on his blinkers, and he had to establish in the middle. He wanted to establish when it was red. And I'm, stop. And then the guys behind us were honking, and then they decide, okay, I need to back up. And they were already like, I'm like, duh. And then he bit the red light to turn.
Now, this is just for context here. I have driven with you, and your vibes carry over into your drive. You're calm, you're cool, you're solid, you're confident. Like, you're a great driver, obviously. This obviously did not rub off into your brother. You tried to teach him.
first attempt, second attempt, and then I said, you know what, dude, I think I have this driving instructor that's not going to take so much from you.
So you can keep your relationship?
Yeah, so I can still be your brother.
Did he get his license?
He got his license after the second attempt.
I had my stop moment actually didn't come with my family. It came with the on my test.
Oh.
So when I went right when I was 16 to try to get my license in Manitoba, and I passed the parallel parking. Woohoo! I'm really good at that. However, I was driving and I was doing well, and then I got to a stop sign, and I looked both ways, obviously, and then I proceeded. And as I'm proceeding through the intersection, the driver starts yelling, "Go, go, go!" Not stop. Yeah. And you got to get through this intersection. Go. And so I just looked around and I got on the gas. There was a car coming straight for us. Ooh. What I failed to understand, which I always look at now, you never forget this, is obviously it was a two-way stop.
Two-way stop.
Not a four-way stop. So there was a car coming. Oh. And never mind, I had waited till the car came close and then I started to proceed. So yeah, I failed automatically. And I'll never forget the instructor. It was so nice. The person who was doing my test, rather. They looked at me and they said, you had a perfect thing going. You were doing everything perfectly. I had no demerits, nothing, on my test. But I have to fail you because that's an automatic fail.
During my test, the instructor liked me because I did not see them there. I was just having a chat with myself. Left turn, yield at this point.
You
turn on
passed
your
the first
blinker,
try,
and
didn't
it
you?
was like,
check. Yeah. We all know you did. Well, I'm a little bit in the camp with your brother, I guess, because I didn't pass on my first time. But if you got a story, or if you have a story about teaching or learning, 788-3205. Your CBC Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it's partly cloudy, 15 degrees in downtown Winnipeg. Mix of sun and clouds today, but we still have a slight chance of showers and still a risk of a thunderstorm this afternoon. Today's high is 20. Picking up the pieces in Swan Lake First Nation after a tornado touched down last night. As the video of the twister in Swan Lakes, just south of Winnipeg. Chief Jason Daniel says fortunately no one was hurt, but the powwow arbor in the community was damaged.
Most of it was to the roof structure, so we have to do a bit of an assessment today. We're already looking at it last night, but we're just trying to plan for our annual event here coming up in a few weeks here. So it's going to be a bit of a challenge, but I'm very confident the community will come together.
Daniels says he's also confident they can repair the arbor before the powwow. He says the aluminum roof of an elder's home lifted at the corners during the storm, and he says they're lucky the tornado wasn't further north in a more populated area of their community. That Swan Lake twister was one of 4, possibly 5 tornadoes touching down yesterday. Dan Fulton is a meteorologist at Environment and Climate Change Canada.
Multiple reports of tornadoes, as you were saying, like Rapid City, Rivers, Balder, all kind of in the countryside, like near those places. But quite a few reports as it made its way down to Morden-Winkler. No reports from Morden-Winkler, but we did get golf ball sized hail, and some reports of wind damage in Morden-Winkler there.
Fulton says it's going to take some time to confirm the exact number of touchdowns. And because most of the twisters were in fields and unpopulated areas, he says it'll be difficult to gauge how strong they were. Manitoba's public guardian has left some people feeling trapped and helpless. It's those people who might wake up in a hospital and later learn a government agency has taken over their life. It is reality. One Winnipeg man says he's been fighting for years. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargoot has his story.
2 years ago, George Kinsman fell in his apartment and was unconscious for 3 days. When he woke up in hospital, the staff told him they would get him some help if he signed some papers. So he did. What he didn't realize is he was giving up his rights and agreeing to be placed under public guardianship. That means a trustee makes all his personal and financial decisions and provides the 71-year-old with a weekly allowance.
I feel like they have me by the throat. They just keep holding on and holding on. I can't do anything.
More than 2,700 Manitobans are under the care of the public trustee. Kinsman believes the province should have a better mechanism to review those cases. That way, people mistakenly put under guardianship would have an easier way to get out. Caroline Bargoot, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Winnipeg father who was killed in a stabbing Tuesday is being remembered as a caring and funny man. His family held a vigil last night on Kennedy near Cumberland. People brought photos of Ricky Manchese and lit candles in the spot where he was stabbed. His wife, Shirley Perot, says they had been married for 15 years.
He was such an outgoing person, friendly. He always lent a helping hand. He called himself, everybody called him like a comedian. And some people called him like a gentle giant.
Perot says she was there when the assault happened near their son's elementary school. The couple was walking home when they were approached by an aggressive man with a knife who then fled the scene. Police say they are investigating and no arrests have been made. The family of Morgan Harris is relieved the province is preparing for a search effort for her remains. It has been more than 2 years since Harris and Mercedes Myron were killed and put in a dumpster. Harris's cousin, Melissa Robinson, saw the healing lodge that is being built for families. She and the rest of the family toured the cells at Prairie Green Landfill that will be searched.
It's going to be so much more fulfilling when this is done. I think of the day when we can, when we retrieve her and we have her, and then when we can bury her and allow her spirit to cross over.
Robinson says yesterday was Harris's birthday. On Saturday, the family is holding a powwow in her honor at Camp Morgan at the Brady Road landfill. And a staggering rate of First Nations newborns have been involved in Manitoba's child welfare system. That's according to a new study by the University of Manitoba and 2 First Nations groups. It looked at data from 47,000 First Nations infants born in Manitoba between 1998 and 2013. It found 1 in 3 had an open file with CFS before they turned 1. Kathleen Kenny is the lead author of the study.
I think the crisis of infant removal has been voiced for some time, and I think the underlying message here is that the need for change is urgent and that First Nations-led solutions need to be prioritized.
Manitoba's Families Minister, Nahani Fontaine, says work is underway to, quote, decolonize Manitoba child welfare. You can find out more on all of these stories. They're up on our website this morning. You just have to go to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather Wells.
You're welcome.
Aaron Broman, Heather Wells, and Megan Ketcherson in our news center this morning. Well, hopefully we're not ending the show without anything major, leaving you hanging on your morning commute, but it's been pretty good so far, except for a little slow through St. B. Last quick look at our forecast with Abby.
Clear skies, sunny, some sunshine in some regions. Cloudy conditions will come in the evening period. We're going to see rain and thunderstorm in some other areas. Temperatures in Thompson and Churchill, 5 degrees at the moment, heading to a high of 17 and 10. Brandon all the way to Morris, chance of showers and thunderstorm, highs hovering around 21. Winnipeg, lots of sunshine we're seeing this morning, and we're heading to a high of 20. Tomorrow looks brighter and sunny.
All right, thanks, Abby.
You're welcome.
Thank you for joining us here on Information Radio. Don't forget about the call-in this afternoon between 12:30 and 1 on Radio Noon about workplaces and the ability to work from home and how that's changed your life or changed your office. You can always call now and leave a message, 788-3797. I'm Marcy Marcusa on behalf of myself, Corey Funk, Megan Ketcherson, Heather Wells, Aaron Broman as mentioned, Abby Adiemi, and Kevin Nipatebo. That's our live team. Take care, be well, enjoy the rest of your Thursday, and we'll talk to you again right here on CBC tomorrow.